This is the Ankh-Morpork Historians Guild. Today we'll be discussing and reviewing Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. My name is Purtis and I use they them pronouns.
My name is Mulch. I also use they them pronouns.
My name is Chio, and I use she, her pronouns.
Cool.
We're crushing it.
Um, yeah, so I'm very excited for this one because I am a big fan of Good Omens, mostly the show, which I have how many tabs open do I have of fan fiction of it right now? I have
Too many.
258 258 tabs open of Good Omens fan fiction right now.
Not sure if that's a sign of you being a fan of Good Omens so much as a sign of the fact that you have executive dysfunction or something.
Well, I do read Good Omens fan fiction every day. Like, I read at least one Good Omens fanfic, every day. Um,
To say that you think of Good Omens like at least every hour that you are awake.
I wouldn't go that far. I'm distracted by things sometimes. But, um, so I'm very excited for this. But I hadn't read the full book before. This is my first time reading the full book. So that was very interesting, and it's very interesting to see the differences between the book and the show, and like the creative choices they made.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, why don't we mention that? Why don't we mention what our experience with this book is? Because we're all readers of Terry Pratchett novels.
mhm,
Why don't we talk about what our background with this
Yeah.
book is in particular?
mhm. Um,
Because you've never read it. This was one of the few books I ever tried to read as a kid but failed to finish. It is in the
uh-huh.
illustrious category as Inkheart, which is the only other book which I just could not physically finish when I was younger.
Uh-huh.
Sorry to Inkheart and all of you Inkheart fans. I know you guys are diehard as shit, but I can't finish that book, man. um,
Man.
just because I think it is a little. We'll get into its issues later. I want to start with the good stuff because there is a lot I really like about this book.
Yeah, yeah.
I never
Um,
could finish it. Chio, what about you?
My relationship with Good Omens is that for some reason or another, I didn't read it, and I read up until a certain point where I just kind of stopped reading it, procrastinated on reading it for this episode, because I thought I wouldn't like it.
mhm. Did you end up liking it? Or like
Actually, yes, I would say that I ended up liking it quite a bit, except for one element that I hate with like my entire soul and my entire being. But otherwise, I like the book quite a bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, I feel really love hate about this book. There's some parts about this
yeah.
book that I absolutely adore, which are
Mhm.
charming and heartwarming to the absolute nth degree. And then sometimes you have to read about a woman,
Yeah.
which is bad.
Which is unfortunate. Um,
Just any
to
woman
be
who
clear,
appears in this book
yeah,
is
yeah.
pretty bad.
Um, yes. Um, no, but, like, um, one thing I'd say that I really liked more in this book than I did in the show was the kids' parts. I think the kids' parts, which is a lot of what Terry Pratchett wrote, are just very charming in this book, and they did cut a lot of that out of the show, which it would be very hard to make a part of the show, but it is too bad just because it is so charming in this book. Um, all the stuff with with Adam and the them.
Yeah. Yeah, Adam and the Them, all of their parts strike like straight to my heart. Straight to
Mhm.
every single one of the best days I had growing up. Like obviously when I was Adam's age at this book, I was running with these boys and it like very much felt the same, these pointless arguments. He's running around in the sun, just like making your own fun and just like fucking completely unsupervised. um,
Yeah.
this strikes like every single part of Adam and them. It's set so
Mhm.
well and so charmingly that I am not a big fan of children, and my childhood was very non-traditional, and I still absolutely loved them, and I wanted to be there with them. And in many ways, I felt like I was. The writing on
Mhm.
them was just incredible. Like it just felt amazing to me.
Mhm. Yeah. Um,
I also really like the bits with Raleigh and Aziraphale. Uh,
yeah. I did too. Like, you talked a little bit about having trouble with how those bits were written, Purtis. I wasn't bugged by it at all. Like, I really liked the Crowley and Aziraphale bits. Um,
Yeah, there
I
are.
actually really liked how they were written. Like, I liked all of the weird little Terry Pratchett footnotes,
Yeah,
the
there
little details of their lives.
there
mhm.
are there are some Aziraphale and Crowley scenes that I did really enjoy how they were written, and then there are
Mhm.
others where I just feel like it's such a drag, and I'm like so over it.
Uh-huh.
And we'll get into what I don't like about some of the writing in this book later. Again, I want to start with the things I do like,
Mhm.
because there are things
Yeah.
I really hate and there are things I really love about this book, and I am an intensely critical person, so I'd like to start with the things that are good.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
But some of those
we're
parts
not gonna
were
jump
really.
into war yet.
No, no,
Yeah.
no, no. We'll get to that. Some parts of it of Aziraphale and Crowley were really strong, and the relationship was really charming. I prefer
Mhm.
Book Aziraphale, who is generally like much more forward, much more sassy, um, much more
Yeah.
direct. In the show, he kind of comes off as almost bumbling and
Yeah.
foolish. And in this, he really is much more direct, and I really, really appreciate it. Um,
Yeah, I found the differences between Show Aziraphale and Book of Aziraphale really fascinating because, like, Show Aziraphale thinks that, he's on Heaven's side. Like, he thinks that he's sort of, like, in denial about how the world works and how heaven works, and and Book of Aziraphale is just straight up, like, knows what's up. He's the one that points out that like heaven did like Sodom and Gomorrah, and like they think up of the same things that hell thinks up. He like Crowley and Aziraphale both like mention asking for asylum from the other side. Like they're both kind of aware of being on each other's sides and being like not fully committed to their respective, you know, sides. It is really interesting to me how different the characterization is.
yeah,
Um,
it feels particularly interesting because Aziraphale is one of the most like visibly gay characters
mhm,
in a lot of ways. Um, and I think the change in that character is influenced by like where the gay community is at right now.
uh-huh,
And I think that's really interesting because he wrote like Good Omens, 1990s, right?
mhm,
Queer movement is pretty strong right now and is having more of a mainstream moment despite having no rights. Like
uh-huh,
Bound would come out like 1 year after this book, for instance. I always or no, right before this book. Sorry, my apologies.
mhm,
Or a couple years
Came out
after.
in 1997.
1990. Okay, hold on. This book came out in 1991. Bound came out in 1996. So a couple years
mhm.
apart.
Yes.
That's the 90s, right? I love Bound. My heart. Um,
Wanna watch it with me?
at any time, yes, I love Bound. It's
I've
so
never seen it,
Excellent.
so
it's so wet, y'all. Let's watch
Together.
this.
Uh,
So I think it's really interesting. I think it's really interesting for Aziraphale to change because like Nowadays, I think a lot of what the gay community wants is this like kind of harmless, bumbling man. Um,
Mhm.
Whereas like I feel a lot of people would have thought of gay people as much more forward. You do come out fighting a little bit. Like
Mhm.
even though he's a poofta,
Uh-huh.
uh, he comes out fighting. Like he is aggressive and he knows what he wants and where he wants to be all the time. I think that
Yeah.
those changes are like so interesting because the
Uh-huh.
idea, right, of like a gay guy in 1990 who doesn't know how the fucking world works is insane. It's
Mhm.
nonsensical, right? Like, can you fucking imagine? But it does work in 2020, or when it came out, which was what, 2019.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it was.
Um,
Um,
and I think that it change is super interesting. I definitely prefer
mhm,
book book Aziraphale
mhm.
a lot.
I definitely think I prefer him as a person. Um, Show Aziraphale is just extremely fun to play with in fanfic, so I'm very attached to him. Um, um,
I will note that, like, adding to it,
but I do.
Michael Sheen does a killer performance in the show. I rewatched a bit of it last night, and he was really good.
Yeah, I don't
Mhm.
think I'd like
Yeah,
show Aziraphale played by a lot of characters. Like straight up, I think he's, I think played by a lot of actors, he'd be really annoying to me.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
But Michael Sheen puts in 120,000% and really does his
Yes.
character justice. Um,
Yeah.
And I think Michael Sheen likes playing Aziraphale, you
I,
know?
yeah, very, very
Yeah.
much so. I
Sometimes
mean,
actors
Oh,
will take a role just because it's, like, a starring role in something, whereas, like, everything Michael Sheen does in the show and everything he's done afterwards in relation to Good Omens, seems to express a real love and enthusiasm for the
yeah.
material
I mean,
Well,
for his
he was
he's
character.
been playing the character for free, even.
yeah. Yeah, he
You know,
well, he was originally gonna play Crowley, but then he read the script and he was like, "No, I wanna be Aziraphale. I think I can do this character." I,
OMG, I love that.
yeah, um, no, yeah, he was originally gonna play Crowley, and he does like, Michael Sheen just shows his like, he's very, he really enjoys fanfic of Aziraphale and Crowley, um, and he's very adamant about Aziraphale being like, him playing Aziraphale as being in love with Crowley, um, which I appreciate.
yeah,
Um,
he's been really cool. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, fuck, I love Book of Aziraphale though.
Yes.
Yeah.
I really like Book of Aziraphale too, to be clear, like,
I
um,
like his bookshop.
yeah.
I do love his dumb bookshop. I love how it got changed at the end too. I think that's really funny. Um,
Mhm.
okay.
That
What?
is my favorite, version of the, running Terry Pratchett joke that, about, small bookshops being owned by people who really don't wanna sell books.
Mhm. Yeah. Um,
Um,
Great lengths to discourage buyers.
though I will
mhm.
say every bookshop I've ever been into, they do genuinely want to share their books so fucking badly with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every time I
It
go in.
might be, like, a British thing because I've had great experiences in bookshops
Yeah,
in
exactly.
Yeah.
America,
I go into a
small towns
bookshop
in
and they're like,
America.
"Oh, please, let me recommend you a book. Please. Oh, you don't have enough money? It's half off. I don't care. Please read this book."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh, wow." Oh, geez. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
Um,
okay.
and also, I don't non-weird way to say this. I loved the I loved the gay jokes. Like, when
Yeah.
that kid called Aziraphale a faggot, I lost my fucking shit.
It hits like a fucking brick. There's a
God,
couple of them that hit so hard, and I was like, "Oh my
I
god!"
yeah, the first time I tried to read this, I I did try to read this before we read this for the book project, this podcast, but, I got to that part and I was like, "Oh, oh geez." That it hits like a train. It's like, I you really went there, man.
Yeah. It is worth noting for the people who have maybe not read as much of the book or don't really. People are fucking mean to Aziraphale.
Yeah,
About him being gay.
yeah,
Which is, it's extremely accurate to the time. It would have been
yeah,
maybe a little weird if people weren't.
yeah,
I will say it kind of disappointed me at times that there wasn't a lot of other expressions of him being gay. Um,
yeah,
except for the Southern Pansy, which is still the best
yeah,
line fucking in this entire book. It hits
yeah,
so right. It feels so good when he's like, "No, I'm
yeah,
the Southern Pansy." Like,
yeah,
yes, yes, you
yeah,
are. Um,
yeah,
There's also, like, we're all Americans if you can't tell from our accents and shit. And Southern in England means a very different thing than Southern in America.
mhm,
So there's a moment going, wait, South, South. Oh, right, South England.
yeah,
yeah, I didn't even think
um,
about that aspect. So I'm so used to it.
yeah, um,
Um, all right, I'm gonna switch it into some other shit that I really liked about this book that we haven't gotten into, but is a little more complex. Something I thought was really fascinating about this book is I have read a fair amount of collaborative books, and I've even read some Terry Pratchett collaborative books.
uh-huh,
It is a bogglingly difficult thing to do, and I can't imagine doing it. Something
uh-huh,
that made this book very interesting was that it was written by two writers of two different minds confronting the same basic fears. They were both
mhm,
sitting there confronting these fears of the world changing, of the world burning up, of the of modernity taking away meaning from our lives, of all of these little things that are all to do with, I mean, the book came out in 1990, 10 years away from the millennium, and we've fucking just got computers under control, and it's clear, I think, to both of them that they're going to go far. They were both, by this
mhm,
time, avid computer users and would continue to be. Shout out to
mhm,
Neil Gaiman's Tumblr, um, which has kept me alive during this pandemic. Um, and it was so fascinating to see how they have almost conflicting ideas about these things together.
yeah,
It really paints a much more human perspective. I love Terry
mhm,
Pratchett's ability to write a single message in his book. But the real truth is, most of us sit around not knowing for sure what we feel about a thing and having so many different conflicting fears and passions and ideas for these things. And it was nice to see that expressed in this book, especially for something as confusing as modernity, as confusing as climate change, as confusing as raising kids in that environment.
mhm,
Um,
yeah,
Yeah.
it was really exciting to see,
mhm,
and really enjoyable.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, note of collaboration. Uh, uh, we're obviously like a Terry Pratchett podcast. We're all huge fans of Terry Pratchett.
yes. We
Uh,
are not necessarily fans of Neil Gaiman.
uh,
Um, he's just not our style, really. Um,
I should say of Neil Gaiman's writing.
yeah,
Um,
Yeah.
Fact is, I haven't read enough Neil Gaiman to know what my opinion of his writing is.
Mhm,
I I read Coraline a couple times back when I was in, I think, middle school.
mhm,
But I'm not sure if I read it since. I don't think I've read Coraline in over a decade. And I think I also read some of his short stories uh, back in middle
mhm.
school as well. But I I honestly have no memory of them, so
Yeah,
I can't confidently say whether or not I'm a fan of Neil Gaiman.
yeah.
I
I've
fucking
I've
can.
yeah.
I I have game Neil Gaiman is interested in a lot of the things I am interested in. And he's written about a lot of things of a similar relation to the things I want to read. I have tried getting into his novels many times. Um, I
Mhm,
just don't like how he writes. Um, I am not a fan of it. But to his credit, I have loved almost all of the things he has ever done where someone else can stop him from novel writing. And I've loved anything
mhm.
else where he can work visually. His comic books are fantastic. The movies made out of his novels that he works on are fantastic. His television
Yes.
episodes, fantastic. Um,
Yeah.
I love
I think it's
even his
safe to
like
say,
Babylon 5 episode. I love his Babylon 5 episode. Fantastic. Really enjoyable.
Uh-huh.
I think he's super
No,
creative and super interesting. And he's dealing with a lot of the ideas I want to work with. I just don't like his writing style.
yeah, I would agree with that, like, I have liked, what I've seen of his stuff visually. I've tried reading some of his books, and I just couldn't get into them, um, and I think part of that is how slow it is because he is a very descriptive writer, I suppose, like, um, but just something about the writing I just can't get into. Um,
Yeah. I have a lot of critiques for it. But
mhm.
again, I want to talk about good things first.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, I feel like not sure if that's possible to like cleanly separate the good bits from the bad bits.
I
At
don't
least it's not for me.
I don't think it's
Uh
perfectly possible, but I want the primary focus to be that. If I'm going to sit down and critique the writing style of this book, I think we can do that for a while. My concern is that it is a lot
Mhm.
easier for us to talk about the bad things than the good things.
Yeah, it always is.
I mean, yeah. At the same time, I know that there are bits it got 'cause we're all in a group chat together and we talk pretty regularly. I know from doing that that there are bits that you guys hate that I don't have a problem with or that I think are actually kind of good. So,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um,
Um well, let me
yeah,
mention this one last good thing. Um both these men are at both these points at this book. There are several points in this book that are dealing with Americans, which like
mhm.
heavily ties into the general themes of modernity and the world changing as they're writing this, end of Cold War America, full ass established superpower now, ready to take over the world for the next now. Um
Yeah, yeah.
and they fucking hate Americans. They're like furious. They like fucking hate these guys. It's so fucking funny. Every American that appears in this book is like asshole, bigot, evil, stupid. Um not a single one of them is like even slightly redeemable. There's a point where like one of the American soldiers doesn't understand that a cigarette is called a faggot, and so a person says that they like to burn faggots, and the American soldier is like way into this.
Yeah.
Or the senator, He's not a senator in this. He's just a businessman, which I think works better for the period 1990, where we're
Uh-huh.
just
Uh,
coming out of like 80s Thatcherite and Reagan.
wait, are you talking about Warlock's dad?
Yeah.
Pretty sure he was the
He's an
senator.
American. He's
Let me
still an
check.
American diplomat.
Oh,
Okay.
is he still an American diplomat? Okay, okay, okay.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
thought
because
he.
they say in the baby
Yeah.
swap scene.
For some reason,
They
I
say in
just
the
thought he was. Okay, okay,
um
okay.
yeah,
Well,
in the baby swap scene they say. Yeah.
that baby swap scene is a whole thing that we'll get into.
Yeah.
Um,
Like the baby swap scene a lot.
you're insane.
Um,
Um, I
that's one of my favorite
we'll get.
scenes in the book.
I There are parts of it I really really like. It just like dragged on so. It's so long. It's really
Mhm.
really really long.
Yeah, but it's
For no
also one
fucking
of
reason,
the like
in my opinion.
memorable and entertaining.
I really
See,
didn't
this
feel
is
that
what
way
I mean
about it.
about not being able to separate the
Well, if you
good
let me,
from the
let me.
bad
Well,
easily.
I was just trying to talk about how they thought this American was dumb. I was trying to talk about the good
Yeah.
part in it, um, which
No,
is that like
as a
he's kind of a dick to his wife, and um, is just
Which
like on
and
a
it's
phone call with her.
fantastic.
It's so
yeah,
funny. He's so funny.
and they
He is
specifically wanted the anarchist raised by Americans because Americans are evil, and it'll make him evil.
Yes, yes, yes.
was necessarily that Americans are evil so much as like America is the world superpower.
Mhm. It's a little bit
So the
because
two might
Americans
be
are
one
evil.
and the same in the book.
Um, which
But it's
as
worth noting that the
Americans
kid doesn't turn out particularly evil. He turns out like very normal.
yeah,
Isn't that the point?
Do you
um,
mean Warlock or do you mean
Warlock,
Adam? Oh, I thought that was another interesting change
but
in that.
Warlock.
Uh, I thought that was another interesting change in that Warlock actually is a dick in the TV show, whereas
yeah,
like he doesn't really appear again in the book
uh-huh.
after they stop raising him, and then he.
Can I say,
Yeah,
that
kind
I
of the
love
point. I think was that he like a a kid, no better or worse than really any child.
Yeah,
mhm,
whereas he
uh,
totally is a dick in the show. He's like really mean.
yeah, can I say that, I loved the full cast audiobook of this. I think, the voice of God is really great, and I think, David Tennant and Aziraphale did a great job of Aziraphale and Crowley in the audiobook. The worst part of it was, like, the 2 seconds when Baby Warlock was on screen. Like, Baby Warlock has such a awful little kid's voice, like, an adult clearly trying to do a, like, wobified little kid's voice, and it's awful. Um, I hated I hated that.
Yes, I agree. I do remember that. It is just straight up an adult going a little squeaky voice.
Yeah, yeah, um,
I would say that on the topic of the full cast audio, this is probably the best full cast audiobook I've ever heard.
mhm,
Yeah,
Um,
it's really well
specifically
done.
reluctant to do listen to the full cast audio because in my previous experiences with them, the changes between voices tends to be really abrupt and jarring, and
Mhm.
there's always like one primary character who is an absolutely terrible voice that I hate.
mhm,
That was not the case with this book. The transitions between the vocal performances were so smooth that there were times when I forgot that I was listening to a full cast audiobook.
Yeah,
yeah.
it was really well
No,
done.
It sounds
it
like
was
a weird
excellent.
compliment, but in my experience, that's the best thing because I just get sucked into the story.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the audio quality was consistent. That's what holds back a
mhm,
lot of audiobooks, or full cast audiobooks, is that like one person will be using like the best mic in the world, and the other person will be using maybe a tin can they found on the fucking ground from 20 feet away,
That got run
and
over by a car,
there's a rat in
walked
the
through a
room,
hedge.
and you're like, okay, so every time John comes on, my ears are assaulted. Um, or there's some kind of like fucking latency happening.
Do you mean our Weird Sisters episode?
Oh, true. God, don't hit me like this. Um,
Um, um, yeah. No, no, it was a great audiobook. And I would have had such trouble with the first audiobook because the first I mean, the audiobook the older audiobook, the reader has a very slow kind of flatter voice, and I had a lot of trouble trying to listen to that because I've tried to listen to the audiobook before too, and I had a lot of trouble listening to him reading it. Um, so I liked the full cast one a lot better.
that makes sense.
Like, all of the main, well, most of the main cast vocal performances were very good.
Mhm.
There's one that I don't like, but I think it might just be because I don't like that character and have more to do with that and less to do with the vocal performance itself.
What character?
Or
War. I see. Yeah.
Oh god.
Yeah, that one's hard to
Uh,
parse. She definitely sounded. I don't know. I think that the actress did like a incredible job matching the voice to the character, in that she was putting on this like really sultry, breathy, like lower
yep.
voice that I think matched the character really well. But I fucking hate the
Uh-huh.
character, and I don't want her to be there.
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
it was very interesting because I was watching the show, the character, and it just occurred to me that the character of War was saying lot of the same lines, but it made me want to die less. But at the same
Uh-huh.
time, I think the performance in the show may have been like technically worse as far
Uh-huh.
as like matching the tone and styling of the dialogue and conviction.
Yeah.
Um,
So like it didn't put me in physical pain.
Yeah.
Very difficult.
Yeah. Jesus.
yeah.
So so War. So my least favorite part of this book was the Four Horsemen, um, which I think is uh, a normal reaction. Um, War was the very worst. War War's sections like were so
Oh
unnecessarily
man.
horny, so
It's not the
like
horniness I have the problem with, it's the misogyny. Like, War's,
it's
sections are hyper misogynistic, is the entire
misogyny.
concept behind, her character is that War is anthropomorphized as a beautiful woman who brings violence with her wherever she goes because, men fight over her, because she, leads men to fight over her.
Mhm. Um, yeah, it was also
Um
her sections were also playfully racist, um, with, like, this,
Oh, yes,
like
very racist.
this made up place in Africa that, what was it called? What did they call it?
I think it was something like Land again. It was like very
It was
similar.
it was it was Hawanda. Yep.
Land.
Oh, was it Land again?
Yes.
Oh
Yes, that was
shit.
it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Same
Which is
place.
Let me check because
cool and
I know
fun.
for a fact that one of them is called Kumbala Land.
Oh yes, yes. Kambala Land is one I remember because we just
Yeah.
talked about it.
Yeah.
And then because Land is something he uses in Discworld.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, not
Maybe
Hwanda
I
Land, Kumbala Land.
Kambala
Oh, yeah,
Land.
I
Okay, there
got
we go.
them mixed up. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's rough every single time. Um, and to note, there are a lot of racist things in this book,
Mhm.
an almost
Yeah.
Yeah.
shocking amount.
Yeah.
Um, and War is bad. She just because the nature, like things are racist around her because, fun fact, they don't place war in Europe at any point during this.
Yep.
except for the
Yup.
final end, because of course not. That's not where wars happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah.
things about, like, the 4 horsemen when I looked at and kind of went, "This is this is through a very specific lens."
Yeah.
Um, Specifically, the war stuff is very interesting because it's always in, like, brown countries full of
Yeah.
brown people, and it's always presented as being, like, muddle of, "Oh, how can we possibly parse who these barbaric who's what the particular between these in a way that I notice a lot of like people in America and in Britain are towards conflicts that are in like non-white countries in a way that they are not about inside of in wars placed in European countries or
Yeah,
Yep.
it's a
sorry
very
that
uncompassionate view, right? White people have justifications and good reasons for war, and everybody else is just a savage.
Yeah.
yeah
And that really comes through in this book. It really
Yeah.
does. Uh, and it does in some of the other things that they talk about, like because they're talking about these
this is
universal evils. I think that they show their bias
um
really intensely.
Yeah.
yeah. And it's worth noting that this isn't because there wasn't any war in Europe in the 90s. Like, um,
Like I've
after
mentioned
the
the
dissolu
troubles 100 times in this
Yeah.
podcast,
yes, yes, oh boy,
right? Like,
which was very close to home, by the way. But also I was thinking of after the dissolution of Yugoslavia, like
mm,
there was a massive amount of inside of the region, the former regions that had been part of Yugoslavia, like Bosnia, Herzegovina,
yes,
Serbia, Kosovo.
Mhm.
Like, shit was going down in Europe during the 90s. There is
But
so
they
it
were
is
like
pretty
there was
fucking
a
weird
lot of
that
civil unrest
but they
I
throughout
were
the
think
like,
book.
"No, let's put this in fictional Africa.
Yeah,
Let's like."
and they're savages.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it really, the scene is played for laughs, but it really
the
is
fact
like,
that like
it really is that they're all drunkards and just like want to control the hotel bar for like shits and giggles.
Oh
And
god, the hotel scene was so bad.
yeah,
It's
and that was
I think
in a South
part of
American island, right? Like,
it
yeah, something like that.
yeah, I think part
rough.
of it that might be that it's like British people to joke about like to make light of and joke about conflicts inside of like Africa or South America and hard for them to joke about conflicts happening in their own backyard.
Well, of course,
Yeah.
but again, that's just because of
Racism.
how they view
Yeah.
those things.
Um, yeah,
Mhm.
and also in the hotel scene, the only ones who survived were, like, the white tourists,
Yes.
um, which
Joke
sucked.
about like foreigners being different.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, they're like,
Really
well,
supposed to
wow, they
be like
certainly do it different here. Like, Jesus Christ, I could kill a British person right
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
huh?
Kill and eat one.
Just, I'll say you're fucking savage.
be a joke at the expense of the British but like it's clearly supposed to be a joke at the expense of British tourists being racist, but at the same time, how can you make that joke when your entire section has been that attitude?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, I get where they think the humor is, and I'm sure somebody finds it very funny. It's just not really. They
Yeah.
are themselves doing the thing in satirizing the thing, right? That's
Yeah.
always the danger in satire. Is
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
line between actually being that and making fun of that is smaller than you think. And generally
Which
speaking, Terry Pratchett does pretty good. I feel in this book that ratio was so bad.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like I I can't say that this is like the worst racism I've seen in a Terry Pratchett book,
But it's not great.
bad. And I would say that the war stuff is a new and interesting type of misogyny that I have not seen in Terry Pratchett's work before.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you're right that any individual instance of
Seen him
racism is not the biggest, but there is a lot of them, and it being placed in the roughly modern day, um, makes it worse because
Yeah.
you get to see kind of their opinion on real actual events,
Yeah, instead of
like the modernization of Japan and its entrance into the world as a technological superpower. Uh, got some
that stuff was so bad.
got some pretty difficult comments, some incredibly difficult comments in this book.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh, yeah,
again, I think it's also interesting to bring up the show because I remember, like, so I wanted to say that, like, I wanted to bring up the Good Omens miniseries,
Mhm.
because I remember that the first scene with War also inside of the miniseries also made me turn it off. It
Yeah.
wasn't like anything as serious as like rage quitting or leaving permanently. It just made me not want to watch the show.
Mhm.
Um, because I really didn't like its presentation. I didn't like the idea way it was presenting this like glamorous white woman sort of swaggering into this conflict and then sort of determining the fate of these brown people and then swaggering off in this like cool way it was presented as being like cool and sexy and glamorous. Like
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, it was
I,
so bad.
it's rough.
it's
Like
something I see in like superhero comics a lot where
Oh my
these
god, yeah.
where they'll present these like super glamorous model looking white women and then like these sort of like othered brown people whose
mhm.
like conflicts are presented as being vague and indistinct and sort of as a tableau for presenting
Yeah,
Not
this
I
only vague
character
and
and
indistinct, but infinite.
demonstrating their powers.
Yeah, not only vague and indistinct, but often instantly solvable. Because
yeah,
again, the reason brown people have war is because they're savages in these stories, and their problems are stupid and small.
yeah,
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and
read every Wonder Woman comic, and it'll start like this. Like runs often
yeah.
start like this with
yeah,
Wonder Woman.
I'm
Um,
I'm a big Birds of Prey fan, and there were issues of Birds of Prey that made me very, very uncomfortable.
Yes.
yeah. Um, God, I'm so glad they cut most of the Four Horsemen stuff
Uh,
in the
and
series.
yeah, every I had with War inside of the miniseries, if I tenfold.
Just to say another nice thing, the line about the flaming sword, the subtle "it was flaming as ever" is funny as shit.
Yeah,
Like,
flaming like anything.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really good line. It's a great
Uh-huh.
introduction, and it's a great way to be
Yeah,
like, nudge, nudge. He's gay.
yeah, yeah. No, love that. Um, God, I know Aziraphale is the more, like, gay presented character, but, like, Crowley's determination to, like, run after Aziraphale in the show is, like, so
It's much gayer.
it's
I cut
so
out, and then
gay.
I get in to hear you saying the gayest shit I've ever heard.
It's
It's
gay.
so gay.
It's gay. It's wonderful. I think it's nice though. I will say, like, I almost do feel like the book is more explicit that these guys are in love, but in a
Uh-huh.
much more 1990s way.
Yeah. The
Like, I think they are much closer in a very weird way, partially just
yeah.
because we don't see them fight. Like,
Yeah,
really.
like, they're like, they know it's just a fact that they are it's more at least a fact that they're on each other's side than it is in the show. Like, that's a whole big dramatic thing in the show is like Aziraphale's whole arc is learning and figuring out that he's not on Heaven's side, that he is on Earth's side, that he is on Crowley's side. But in the book, it's just kind of like he knows. He knows that he's not he doesn't agree with Heaven's views. He knows that, you know, Crowley is the closest thing he has to, like, a friend, or like, you know, I and I found that very interesting. Like, I like how dramatically. Oh, Chio went. Did you guys hear?
I think Chio's figuring some stuff out. I can hear
Yeah.
you.
Well,
I was just gonna get you started talking about Aziraphale and Crowley until that was done, since it's still
oh
Yeah.
usable
god.
audio.
I do think the changes in the show make sense for, like, a dramatic romantic plot where, like, they're, you know, like, the breakup scene is it in its own way incredibly romantic because you can see, like, in Aziraphale's face, like, every micro expression of Aziraphale's face is so emotionally affected by it, and, like, Crowley, like, just being the whole time like, "Oh, run away with me," and then is rejected, and then, like, 2 minutes later is like, drives up to him in the car and is like, "Oh, run away with me," and then and then is rejected again, and then, 2 minutes later is, like, trying to call him and, like, go to the bookshop even though he's been rejected twice, like, it's like
Yeah, I think the conflict makes it more romantic.
like,
Like,
it is a classic. I mean, it is a romance, like, in the show, like, they're not as inherently close because they do have these obstacles and these problems, but it is played as a romance,
Yeah.
and it is, like, very romantic in a not like, in the book, it's subtle, in the show, it is not subtle. Like,
yeah,
It feels like in the show it's a romance show, whereas in the
yeah,
books these guys are married and
yeah,
have been for a while,
and that's
which I feel
that's
makes a lot more sense because these guys
yeah,
have known, like, that's something that bothers me
it's
about
been
this show is it's
6,000 years.
6,000 fucking years. What do you mean you guys haven't
Yeah,
talked this out?
yeah,
Go to
yeah.
therapy.
Um,
Um,
they really need to go to therapy, and that is the fanon interpretation of that constantly in the book, Aziraphale and Crowley just got married at some point, and they don't really talk about it, it's just in the background. Uh, uh, Show Crowley and Aziraphale are dramatic bitches who've just been, like, doing this for 6,000 years in a ridiculous fashion. Um, just been, like, pining for 6,000 years and not talking about it, but, like, being dramatically like this. And then Radio Good Omens,
yeah.
it have just been fucking since the Garden of Eden. Like, that's that's the fanon interpretation of that.
I haven't heard Radio Good Omens. I should check that out.
eh,
I've listened to some of it, it's okay.
it's fine.
Um, it's,
Is
Crowley's
the
voice is very funny. Um and then we don't talk about movie script, Aziraphale and Crowley. That is
Still
banished
haven't read
to.
that. I found it, and I sent it to the group chat, but I haven't read it yet.
Oh god, I am not emotionally prepared to read the movie script of Good Omens. I
And it sounds bad, but I can't talk shit until I know whether or
Just the
not it is.
quotes I've seen though. Just I mean, I I'm gonna read it, but I feel like I like, what I know about it is that Crowley hates the Earth. Crowley tells Aziraphale he doesn't just like, he shouldn't be alive at one point. What was the quote? Is like it's not quite you should kill yourself, but
Oh,
you shouldn't be alive.
you're up.
Um, like, um, so so the whole point of Good Omens is that this, uh angel and this demon are incredible, like, they're not good or evil, they're incredibly human, Like, they've been on Earth long enough to be incredibly human. Their jobs are to be good and evil, but they aren't. Their jobs aren't even really actually good or evil from a human perspective. Um, and then this movie script, they straight up make Crowley evil. They straight up make Aziraphale good. They make Aziraphale the one who is trying to save the Earth instead of Crowley, which just defeats so much of the point of the narrative. And I I'm so mad about the movie script. I'm I'm internally mad about the movie
Here,
script.
here's the line. Here's the line, by the way. I found it. You are so stupid. You don't deserve to live. I didn't tell him anything. If I had, do you think I'd be here right now? Um,
Yeah,
talking
that's
about
so bad. That's
talking
so
about
bad.
telling the demon lords about their
Uh,
agreement.
that's just god awful. And like, God, oh, I also this is more subtle than the change between Aziraphale and Crowley in the show and the book, but I did find the change between Aziraphale and Crowley interesting. Um, like I talked to like they have more conversations in the book, and one of them is the conversation about like where people like um what is it? It's like uh um people have in their lives like choices to be good or evil, and Crowley's like, but wait, like if you're starting people off at such different places, then it's not fair. Like you can't expect somebody to be able to make good decisions if they're in like a crazy like life or death place, or like you start them out like really, um in a much worse place. Um and I talked to my dad about that, and he was like, and like in the most disgusted voice, he was like, uh, "He's a communist."
Jesus
Your
Christ.
dad is a joy.
Jesus Christ, you're dead. Yeah, I think Aziraphale. Okay, this is getting into my
Um,
religious work.
but
Uh-huh.
what struck me as being most interesting was the follow-up response where Aziraphale said, "No, actually, it's easier
I mean, rich
for
people are
people in in a bad place to be good."
well,
And
rich
that struck
people
me as being
are
a really interesting.
inherently evil,
Yeah,
um, which is true. So
so
I
so
guess
critical.
maybe.
Wait,
Um, sorry, what were you saying, Curtis?
yeah. So before we get on, like this gets into the like why part of why I also like Book of Aziraphale more is that Book of Aziraphale, these guys. So this happens a lot in popular media where Christian theology has been going since year one, um, and we've had every argument under the sun. And often, people who are writing about Christian stuff but don't really know anything about it other than living in it, will start to like actually write very good theology. It's one of my favorite things in the whole wide world. And Book of Aziraphale,
Mhm.
so much more, is the perfect description of the like man who wants to have faith so deeply. Like this man who is confronting what seems like so many errors in his religion, but
Mhm.
desires so deeply to have faith. And I
Yeah.
really, really like that about his character. There are points where he goes on like weird little rants that are really just for himself to affirm his own belief, what he needs to be true in the world, um,
Yeah.
in a way that is very realistic. This
Mhm.
line is like part of it. It is easier, like, is part of that whole experience. Like, no, it's easier for poor people to be kind. Because, like, that is very much like real theology and part of like the grand
Yes.
ineffable explanation. And also something that, like, it's Xerophil might or might not actually believe, but he desires to
Yeah.
have faith in it. And they do
Yeah.
this in this
It is
book
a
over and over and over again. And it's something I really love because these guys did zero research on like angels and demons and like theological interpretations of heaven and hell. They just like were raised in a Christian society or were raised in
Yeah.
a church.
Yeah. I
Which
think
has led
Neil
to
Gaiman was
some problems for fandom, I've heard, because they call him a principality, which is fucking stupid as shit.
yeah.
This is really dumb.
Neil
I was
Gaiman was
confused by
raised,
that. When
No,
I heard
they
principality, I was like, is this something I don't know, or are they using that word very incorrectly?
no. So there is in some in some of the hierarchies of angels in angelology, which is very hard for me to
Mhm.
say. There is something called a principality, but he's not, and you can't introduce into your story this like very real belief about a hierarchy of angels without like he's supposed to be the only angel on earth. So
Yeah.
you can't call him a prince. It doesn't make sense. It's just some words I
Yeah.
used.
Yeah. Um,
Um,
so
so yeah,
Terry
So
Pratchett
the answer
was
to both
raised.
questions is yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
there is something I don't know, and yes, they are using that word very incorrectly.
Yes.
I think they
Um,
literally just looked up like high ranking angel.
yeah.
Like
Angels.
I think they were just like,
Um,
hey Bob the priest, what's a high ranking angel? A principality, and they would put that in the book.
yeah. Just Google searched. Yeah. I
Yeah,
was Google search a thing back then?
Ask
I
Jeeves,
don't know.
baby. No,
Um,
it's earlier than
so
that. Um,
so they collaborated on this. It uses very religious theology, and Terry Pratchett was raised Christian and Neil Gaiman was raised Jewish, right?
I
Um,
don't know anything about Neil Gaiman.
yeah,
Would you like?
yeah,
I'll look it
he
up.
was. I just googled it. I just
Oh,
googled
good,
it. He
good, good,
was
good.
raised Jewish. Yeah, which I find very interesting that they collaborated on this. And Neil Gaiman has talked about the fact that being raised Jewish is kind of one of the reasons he kind of looks at like people in the Bible, like uh, religious figures or angels and demons, and thinks, yeah, these are just kind of people. Like they could just kind of fuck up like people. Like, um, so I found that interesting.
That is very interesting. I didn't know that he was raised Jewish, and it
Yeah.
definitely adds that layer to this as that's like part
Hmm.
of the tradition.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and because the interpretation of various biblical characters uh, are vastly, vastly different between the two. Um,
Yeah. There's a lot in this book.
there's
And the
there
show.
is
Yeah.
absolutely. Let's talk about Neil Gaiman's writing style. Um,
Yes.
Mr. Neil Gaiman, if you're ever listening to this, don't listen to this. You don't need to know what some idiot thinks. I'm just some guy on the internet. Nobody should be subjected to some guy on the internet. Mr. Neil Gaiman. Are you still, sir? Or were you ever, sir? I don't know. I know Michael Sheen isn't anymore. Um, so Neil Gaiman's writing style. Neil Gaiman writes books like he's writing scripts. He is super duper physically descriptive in
Hmm.
almost long and winding passages that often feel like they're doubling back on themselves. It overall creates this like really, really slow pace to all of his stories and pieces. It's part of why I really didn't like the baby swap scene, for instance. It just lasts a really long time, and the jokes that are in it feel very far apart from me because his writing is so overly descriptive. What's happening in the baby swap scene doesn't take that long. And I know that it doesn't take that long because he wrote it again for the TV show, and he was able to do it very, very quickly because he was using actual visuals. And most of the time, of the baby swap scene is spent on those descriptions. I could see how this would work for a lot of people, but it is almost the exact opposite to how I read and parse books. I'm not a big visualizer. When I was younger, I would literally just skip the descriptions in books. I just wouldn't read them.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I much prefer Terry Pratchett's general style of description, which is much more about the emotion or the vibe of a place than it is about the exacting details of their physical nature.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I
and
don't think I have that problem.
Yeah, I don't think it's for everybody. Like, I don't think this is true for everybody. I can definitely see the appeal of Neil Gaiman's writing. It's just really, really not for me. It's just not.
Mhm.
And um, the scenes I had difficulty with, a lot of the reason I had difficulty with them was because they lasted so long because of this thing. And it was a
Mhm.
near constant presence with throughout the book that we would hit scenes, especially with the horsemen, that I just felt like nothing happened and they
Oh,
lasted half an hour. Um,
fucking
Yeah.
hated a lot of the horseman scenes. Um,
Mhm.
like,
Like, uh,
um, there's this sort of posturing coolness to them that I found incredibly off-putting.
yeah. Um,
Um,
and me and, Chio talked about a little bit this in the car, while we were uh, while I was driving you somewhere, that there are some good ideas in the famine sections, I think you brought up, um,
yeah, there are
which
some that I thought were more substantive than because in the TV show, a lot of the famine stuff felt very oddies, like the sort of weird non-complaints, the sort of complaints about non-issues I remember from when I was a kid, like ho ho hot nouveau cuisine where you pay hundreds of dollars to get like minimalistic plate with
no,
some like uh s- cilantro jelly or whatever, to
hate that
which I think
shit
has
so
a very
much. So stupid. Makes me so
yeah, to which
mad.
I think the solution to that is to simply not eat nouveau cuisine.
Mhm.
No, it's also not. Sorry, this is a fun fact. I'm quite a gourmand. I really like fine dining. For the listener out there, I hate this fucking complaint. I have spent my entire life hearing this complaint. Motherfucker, you get 23 fucking courses at those places. Of course, there are only like 2 bites. You get like a massive number of courses. I hate that shit so much. It's so dumb.
Mhm.
As if the fucking guy who has spent his entire life thinking about feeding people doesn't have a concept of how much a human being needs to eat. I've
Yeah.
I fucking hate the like concept. Oh, it drives me crazy. Oh, it drives me crazy. And it's also about like why can't food be an arts form, an experience?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like saying, "Oh, I could go watch a fucking movie and see 18,000 images in half an hour, or I could go see the Mona Lisa once." Why would I ever go see the Mona Lisa? It's like, are you fucking stupid? It's not about quantity, motherfucker. You are going to have a brand new experience. Isn't that worth something?
Mhm.
Isn't there an
yeah,
artfulness to it that deserves some respect? I hate those complaints.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I'm with you 100% there. So when I saw that stuff inside of the Good Omens show, I was like, well, whatever. It's like 3 seconds inside of a fucking 6 hour mini series. So it's annoying, but it doesn't bug me that much, but still it's a little annoying. Whereas
Mhm.
in the book, it hits a lot harder and it is specifically about a real problem, which is eating disorders and the constant pressure and sort of American diet culture and the constant pressure to be thinner and thinner,
Yes.
even at
Mhm.
the cost of your life and health.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the model scene was something that read so well in a book that I think would have been really hard to play out in any other format.
Yeah.
Simply
I mean,
because
I
they get
understand why it didn't transfer into the show, but
yeah, well, I think it doesn't read anywhere else, and I really liked it. because
Yeah.
we get to see inside Famon's own head that he actually is trying to hurt and kill this woman, and
Yeah.
and he is working very hard to trick her and people like her. Whereas I feel like in most other formats, if you weren't able to see inside his head, it would be easy to see the woman as the one making a mistake or the one being stupid, which is how it was
Yeah.
presented in so many formats throughout our childhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, how many fucking times did we see the, oh, this model is starving herself for no reason. She's so irrational and stupid.
When the
But,
fact is,
like
if you're a model, there is a constant scrutiny and a constant pressure to be thin, and the idea if you're not thin and you are a model, are you're guilty of a moral failing.
Not only
yeah,
are you
and it
guilty of a moral failing, but you will genuinely lose your entire livelihood. Like, of
yeah,
course
Yeah.
people feel they will genuinely lose their entire livelihood. Like, of course. It's a terrible
Yeah.
position to be put in. It's a cruel position to be put in.
yeah,
So I
and it
felt
comes
like
from
the
so many
famine scenes
places.
were, like, a lot better in the book,
Mhm.
simply because they're about something real. They're about an actual social issue,
Yeah,
Yes. And it's
the way that
presented
the scenes
relatively
in the movie.
compassionately.
Yeah.
yeah.
And, unfortunately, I think it was also there was, like, an issue where either one wrote the model scene and the other wrote this other scene, and or there was, like, I don't know, I feel like they should have been, like, exchanging notes and talking to each other or something, because there's this joke later in the series in the book that was, about this lady later during the, later half of the book that describes her as, she was convinced that she was anorexic because every time she looked in the mirror, she
Oh, yeah, I
didn't
fucking
see a
hated that.
fat person. I was like, "Motherfucker.
Yeah,
Earlier in this
yeah,
book, you're going to talk about toxic diet culture, and then you're going to make a joke about eating disorders?"
I know.
yeah,
It's totally it's painful. It is.
yeah, I
Yeah.
hated that bit.
And I mean they were sharing notes constantly. Like they
Yeah,
both
they
did.
called each other every day, like,
Yeah.
yeah,
They both
Yeah.
absolutely did allow every single thing. This is where it's going to get difficult. They both approved every single thing that's in this book.
yeah,
They both
Yeah.
did. You know, and if anything, um Terry Pratchett probably had more control, as this was Neil Gaiman's first novel, and not the only
This
thing
was
he.
Neil Gaiman's first novel?
Yeah, he was a journalist. He was just a guy, really. It's actually insane.
Holy fucking
No,
shit.
yeah, no. Can you imagine?
Okay, I feel like I've been way too hard on Neil Gaiman then.
So he wasn't.
Congratulations, dude, if this was your first novel.
This was his.
Damn.
This was his first full length novel. He'd written a short story, and Terry Pratchett approached him and was like, "Yo, this is fucking sick. Um, can I write this, or can we co-write it?" They agreed to co-writing. Because they really got on. Terry Pratchett put
yeah.
in an interview with Neil Gaiman through his publicist, which is such a funny thing to do. And they
Also,
really
like,
got on.
if you had the opportunity to write a book with
I know.
Terry Pratchett, it would be insane to say no.
And I
Like,
mean, it was
like,
like
Oh, yeah.
he wasn't even
Oh,
fully Terry
of
Pratchett
course
at this
not.
point, but
Yeah.
he
And
wasn't. But
he'd
he had
written
had
Small
several
Gods already.
successes. No,
no,
he
this was
hadn't.
before Small Goats.
This is
This was
Oh,
before.
right
oh.
before
And he
right
But he'd
also.
before
written
Small Goats.
Pyramids, and I think that was, like, a big seller, right?
Well, so remember that they met like 3 years before this book came out, or something like that.
Mhm.
They wrote it
Yeah.
relatively
Pyramids
quickly because
is,
Terry Pratchett
like
is like breakneck, but they had to get
yeah.
this published in a lot
It
of
was a summer.
places, and
Gonna be
it's
They read
real,
it over summer.
it'd be an amazing opportunity to write with Terry Pratchett, but I don't think I could hack it. I don't think I would be able to, just, like, even keep up.
Well,
no
no,
human being can
obviously
keep
not.
no human being can keep up with it. Terry Pratchett wrote most of this book. That's what it said everywhere. Neil Gaiman says that. Terry Pratchett says that. He wrote the grand majority of this book.
Mhm.
He held the master copy. He wasn't working on something else, and it is worth noting. Like, yeah. So Neil Gaiman, this was his first novel. He was working in comic books at this time, And actually, he would get out of comic books because of after this, because of
Mhm.
Mr. McFarlane, which Chio, you might remember this whole debacle.
I don't. I mean, it seems like something I should know, but I
You
don't.
should know. So, just a quick hit because I think it's really interesting. Todd McFarlane was one of the people behind Image Comics, which branched out for non-comic book readers. Partially branched out because writers and artists and the companies had really contentious arguments about who owned characters and how were they used. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and those arguments went very badly, kind of for everybody but the companies, as is often the case. So Todd McFarlane starts Image Comics with a bunch of other. It's not only him, with a bunch of other people. He starts writing Spawn for Image Comics, and Neil Gaiman works on an early issue of Spawn, which is really influential. He creates several long-lasting characters for that comic, and then right after the publication of Good Omens, for many years, Neil Gaiman is embroiled in a lawsuit between McFarlane and him about who owns those rights and how. Cases which
Mhm.
Wow,
don't
that's
end.
irony if there ever was.
Yeah, cases which don't end in a settlement either, because McFarlane was stubborn as shit. And Neil Gaiman won both cases. He actually had to put two separate cases about this in.
Mhm.
And Neil Gaiman left comic books, uh,
Oh, wow.
which is a great loss. As his comic books really are incredibly good. He was an incredibly good comic book writer.
Yeah.
He's kind of dipping his toes back into that world, and
Yeah, I
I
think
hope he
I've seen
continues to.
some comics from him more recently. At
I don't
least, yeah, in our lifetime.
in our lifetime. I don't think he'll ever go back to the level of depth that he was doing at that time, but he has run several series. Most importantly for you, he wrote the follow up to Batman R.I.P.
Oh, he did.
Yeah,
Wait, that's not.
the follow up, not it itself, but the whatever happened to the Caped Crusader.
Oh, yeah, I was very confused because Grant Morrison wrote the follow up to Batman R.I.P. It's called Batman and Robin.
Oh yeah. So not that, but the whatever happened to the Caped Crusader, which is not itself a Batman. Like you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah,
It's like it's like whatever happened in the Man of Tomorrow, and he oversees the Sandman universe, which is a whole deal nowadays.
but
But
yeah,
he's
that's
not a
huge.
direct writer for it, which is relevant. Um,
Yeah.
so so he'd been doing that. He'd been doing it a lot. He was writing a ton of comics at the time. He had just started Sandman in the course of writing this book, so he was busy as shit. Like
Oh God, yeah.
he was writing all of Sandman. He was writing uh, Black Orchid and some other stuff for Vertigo. Um, it was a mess. Like he was super busy. Terry
I know
Pratchett wrote the
he's doing a
majority of
lot
his
of work
book.
for Vertigo.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, he was. Um, really interesting stuff. I do feel
Yeah.
fine about giving him so much shit because he had been a writer before this. It just is his first novel, which very much is. And I feel good about giving him a little shit for his writing style, both because it is a personal argument and because I know his writing style is still like this. The
Yeah.
Graveyard Book, for instance, is one of those books I fucking absolutely wish I could read. Um, so
Yeah,
many
that's the one
parts,
I tried.
so many
Like,
parts that sound really cool, and I fucking can't. It's so boring. It's so
yeah,
boring. I'm like, oh my god, if you describe another fucking gravestone to me, I will fucking cry, dude.
that's one that my aunt, that is an incredibly dear book to her. She It's like a comfort book. She really loves that book. So I tried to read it and I can't get through it. And it really the ideas in it seem great. I really wish I could read it, and I can't.
Yep.
It is really unfortunate.
No, actually, his most recent book, which got turned into a stage play, or maybe not his most recent. I think he came out with another one. But The Ocean at the End of the Lane also sounds incredibly good. Um, and I think that if I want to actually enjoy it, I'm going to have to go hunt down the fucking stage. Like, I'm going to have to go to a stage play, which it feels insane.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm hoping that show will travel, because it is
I'll
getting
check out his writing.
incredible West End reviews. West End?
Because
Mhm.
I suspect from your descriptions of his writing that I would have like less of a problem with it than either of you two.
Absolutely.
Because
I
Mhm.
mean,
I
if you didn't
like
weren't bothered by
very read a lot of like 19th century novels. So I have like a high tolerance for long, winding, atmospheric descriptions of places.
It's weird. I can do long winding atmospheric description. It's something about his like very. It just feels very mechanical to me. It doesn't pull me along because I can do some purple writing. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm not even talking about writing. I'm talking about like Wilkie Collins
yeah.
and like Charles Dickens.
I think if this book didn't bother you, in terms of writing style, you
I
should
mean, that's the thing.
absolutely. Well,
There were parts
in
that
terms of
drive
writing
me.
style,
Yeah, yeah.
you should
Even the
absolutely
prose,
read
though.
other of Neil Gaiman's work.
There were some prose in this that made me like fucking crazy. Um,
Yeah,
like there
what
is
would make
that.
you?
Let's see. Let me see if I can find it. Here's one bit. She licked a spatter of blood, someone else's, from the back of her hand with a scarlet cat-like tongue. Then she smiled
Uh,
and walked out of the bar, her
uh,
heels clicking on the tiles like the tapping of distant hammers.
thanks, I hate it.
You too.
I fucking hate that. It's
What the
not.
fuck is the tapping of distant hammers? Fuck me.
I mean, that's not the bit I have a
I
problem
don't
with.
like. I dislike every part of it. Um,
Yeah, I really hated the scarlet cat-like tongue. Then
Oh,
she smiled bit.
you know
Um,
what I love?
the thing is that
Sexism.
I don't have a problem with that because it's long and winding. I hate that because it's bad.
Yes.
There are a
yeah,
lot of bits like this, especially like with the four horsemen getting together in the bar.
that
Mhm.
is
Um,
one of the most droll, fucking, and poorly written scenes in this whole book.
yeah, and it doesn't. These bits stand out to me because while I don't know Neil Gaiman's writing style well enough to recognize it and say that it is his, it does not sound like anything Terry Pratchett has written.
It's
Mhm.
again, that scene doesn't work on so many levels. Like what he's having the characters do isn't super interesting. How long it takes is not super interesting. The jokes he pulls are not very great. The like little flashes are often undercut by poor descriptions or repetitive description. Like
Yeah,
literally having Scarlet have a scarlet cat-like tongue. Um, uh,
yeah. That wasn't one of the bar scenes. That was at the
no,
hotel still.
I know,
Yeah.
but I'm saying stuff like that happens in the bar scene over and
Mhm.
over and
Yeah.
over and over and over and over. And that scene is so long, man.
Yeah, it's very long and
It's
torturous.
really, really long for what is essentially three dudes walk into a bar. One of them's great at trivia. One of them doesn't like food. Like
Yeah.
fuck me. It's a fucking joke, right? Like it should be fast, and yet
I
it's
will say
really long. I do like the
that
Hell's
bar
Angel
scene,
thing in there.
yeah, which sounds Hell's Angel stuff seems very Terry Pratchett.
It does.
Um,
Yeah.
I will say
Oh god.
that the bar scene did have my favorite moment from War's voice actress, which is where she sexily asks for a cheese sandwich.
Yes.
God.
Yes, no, I also got hit by that. And I was like, oh my god, what is
Yeah.
that? Oh my god.
God. Man.
Oh, and here's a great example of like the weird whiplash where oh god, okay, here's this line. It had been a good day so far. There was something about the sight of a beautiful woman on a powerful motorbike with a sword stuck on her back that had a powerful effect on a certain type of man. That bit's terrible.
It is.
Then,
God,
so
it sounds so bad too. When it's funny because the narrator can cover some of these things a little bit by the nature of like having a really well-tuned voice and
oh
having
yeah, the narrator
great
is
rhythm.
so good.
The narrator is giving 110% to some of the descriptions that are I would have difficulty reading if I had
Yeah.
Yeah.
been in her position. Um,
Then the immediate sentence afterwards is so far 4 traveling salesmen had tried to race her in bits of Fort Sierra and now decorated the crash barriers and bridge supports along the 40 miles of motorway. The It's like a terrible sentence followed by a really funny sentence, and I don't know what to do with that because I'm still like reeling from the badness of the first sentence when the second sentence comes along.
Mhm. Man.
God, now I'm looking at the paragraph above it and it's even worse.
God, I hated all of war sections because they're super bad. And then, like, famine sections are better, but it famine sections make me feel sick viscerally sick to my stomach. So, like, they were just hard to read.
Yeah, they were
Um,
like deeply upsetting.
yeah. I I can't handle eating disorder stuff. Like, I really get very upset. Um,
God,
like
can I read you that terrible first paragraph?
sure, yeah. Go for it.
She rode a red bike, not a friendly Honda Red, a deep, bloody, rich and dark and hateful. Wait, a deep, bloody red, rich and dark and hateful. The bike was apparently in every other respect ordinary, except for the sword resting in its scabbard, set onto the side of the bike. Her helmet was crimson, and her leather jacket was the color of old wine. In ruby studs on the back were picked out the words "Hell's Angels." It was 10 past 1 in the afternoon, and it was dark and humid and wet. The motorway was almost deserted, and the woman in red roared down the road on her red motorbike, smiling lazily. I fucking hate that.
yeah, it's rough. It's worth noting. I just double checked. In my copy of this book, the meeting up at the bar scene, which is literally again 3 people walking into a fucking bar and talking to some Hell's Angels, takes 10 fucking pages or 4% of the entire book.
Holy shit.
Yeah, 400 page copy takes 10 fucking pages. That's crazy.
Unfortunate.
And it really gets into my like into the heart. Like all of these, that's a great scene to pick apart. That I haven't seen because I think it is the worst scene in this book. Um, it's unbearable. It's a great scene to pick apart because it gets to the heart of so many of the problems we have with these things. Like it's misogynistic. It goes on for a really long time, as you just heard. A lot of the descriptions really are very circular. Um,
Mhm.
and the
Very
quality just
repetitive.
yeah,
Just
so
noticing that
repetitive.
uh, somebody writing this book writes really, really long sentences.
Yes, it's Neil Gaiman.
Looking at Famine's introduction into the bar scene, and the thing is, I like Famine's sections for the most part. His entrance into the bar was so off-putting.
Yeah.
Another another motorbike, jet black and gleaming, drew up in the car park outside. The door to the cafe opened. A blast of cold wind blew through the room. A man dressed all in black leather, with a short black beard, walked over to the table, sat next to the woman in red, and the bikers around the video Scrabble machine suddenly noticed how hungry they all were, and debuted Scuzz to go and get them something to eat. From the
It's
door
just
to the from a blast of cold wind blew through the room. Um, up until get them something to eat. That is all one sentence.
oh, that's a lot.
And
That's
Yeah.
and it's worth noting, like, he's going into all this description of their powers and stuff. They have not gained. They're not more powerful in the course because of anything that's happening. And we've already had 2 scene settings minimum for every single horseman except for Death.
yeah,
Yeah.
So
I
we've
really
already
do
met these
not like.
characters. We're already totally clear on their powers. We've actually followed their careers in the past 11 years in pretty good detail for some
yeah,
fucking
Yeah.
reason. Um these are not mysterious characters to us. And
yeah,
yet they are given all of this time for us to yet again get their powers as if we like aren't aware of what they look like or how they act.
Yeah.
This
And I
very
find
much feels like a scene that was written as an introduction to the Horsemen when we've already gotten one. A fucking lot of them,
yeah.
mhm,
actually.
Yeah.
yeah,
And they're not interesting. They don't have a lot of dimension or a lot going on.
yeah.
No.
They're the
They are
least like
they are
the
by
thing.
design uncomplex.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing about the rest of this book is that it is incredibly human, and it is about being human. And these are non-human characters. These are concepts that they just devote way too much time to. Like it just it doesn't mesh with the rest of the book. It feels weird and out of place and boring.
Prose writing around them.
Yeah.
Like I hate how they're described.
Everything
Mhm.
about them feels out of place. Um,
Feels very phony.
most of the
Mhm.
most difficult scenes are to do with the horsemen. I
Yeah.
like even my favorite horseman, Famine, really only has like a couple of good lines, and
Yeah.
everything else is not great. And
Yeah.
Famine works just
Yeah.
because this concept is funnier. Like it's just funnier
Mhm.
to make not food food, and it's just
Yeah.
funnier
Well, I think
to
also
be hungry.
upsetting. Upsetting by design.
Yes,
Mhm.
yeah, he works on a much more visceral punch level because he's dealing
Yeah.
with things that are that are relevant to Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman's life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman place war very far away from themselves, and even their descriptions of pollution are not really close in
Connected
the
to
same
it.
way. They don't feel
Yeah.
as personal. Um,
Yeah. Pollution is the one that I keep on forgetting simply because I find him offensive but also not interesting.
I mean, he doesn't really do anything. He's just in.
Yeah.
He's just in some polluted places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like
Oh, and they go after
um
nuclear power, which all
yeah.
the rage in the 1990s.
And his section where he's being brought his crown um is more about the mailman. It's that's the bit where you find out about the mailman and like what's
Yes.
going on with him, which was much more entertaining than finding out
Yeah,
about
I like the mailman.
Yeah.
yeah.
The mailman is a
Um
fucking genius character.
yeah.
Feels
God,
very Pratchett.
It does.
so this this is yeah, I love the mailman. I love the line that was like they spoon they've on a few notable occasion or like they used to spoon here and then on one very notable occasion
Fork.
fork.
Yes.
I love
Very
I
funny.
love that one.
And yeah, the mailman is a great character because he's built up to be so lovable in so few words and scenes.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Yeah.
No, he's
he's a
great.
really, really memorable, really, really adorable character that doesn't
Mhm.
have scenes that are directly about him, except for the pollution scene, and still I care so much about him. It's a real
Yeah,
hallmark,
yeah.
uh,
Um,
kind of the good
Yeah.
writing present in this book.
um, oh
I
man.
know that we've gone over the fact that war is just terrible conceptually, but I just can't get over how bad war is.
Well,
Mhm.
let's talk about my least favorite character then,
Okay.
because I think it'll provide a counterbalance of a different way to be truly awful.
Yeah.
Shadwell.
Is this Shadwell? Yeah,
Shadwell
Shadwell.
is maybe the most insane character I have ever read in a novel. And I've read a lot of fucking novels. The way Shadwell is written shows a complete ignorance to much of the way the world actually works and
Yeah.
like what any minority has ever felt about anything ever.
So it is. Yeah.
Shadwell is very explicitly and repeatedly described to be extremely charismatic and well loved, to the point where there is an extended amount of time spent to describing his various sins and how the people in his life overlook them in a way that is detached from reality. Literally, there's a part where it's like, yeah, Shadwell's playfully racist, and his money grubbing immigrant landlords don't really mind because he pays on time, and it's like,
Ooh, yeah, that was rough.
or he literally is described to just repeatedly bang on the bottom of Madame Tracy's house, sometimes stand in the hallway screaming at her in the middle of the night. Um, and she
And
loves
she
him.
just likes it.
Yeah, he
So
only drinks sweetened condensed milk and
Which, to
smokes
be fair,
hand-rolled
is something that
cigarettes.
I would like to do. I
No,
would like to
no,
live on a diet
no,
of sweetened
no,
condensed milk.
no, 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 I can't,
I
I
do love
can't, I
Drink
can't.
I
he
do love
he drinks
sweetened
his
condensed milk.
Speaking of
drinks
eating
coffee the
disorders,
way I
y'all,
wish I had the courage to, okay?
um, it's like, yeah, it's Shadwell is
Like,
incredibly difficult. Everybody is written as loving him, but he is just awful. If I met this man in real life, I would be compelled, maybe by the Lord himself, to strike him down. I mean, talk about ineffable. This fucking guy should not be here. He is insufferable. I did not
and
realize how much they had truly toned him down for the show. Because I still don't like him in the show, but holy shit.
yeah.
I
So
have a somewhat different opinion on Chadwell because, like, I do get what you're saying about how, like, the total ignorance of how minorities feel. Is that is true. If I met somebody in Shadwell in real life, I would be frightened. I
I'd
would,
be so
like,
scared.
physically fear for my safety around
Yes.
him. Um,
that's the thing is this is written from such a perspective that you can tell they don't understand that he is scary. And everybody who has ever been in a position to be scared of somebody else, like, in that way, knows that Shadwell is scary. And the writer, Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett just do not understand that. They do not understand that this is
think
a
for
very
them, like,
human,
somebody like
terrifying
Shadwell
man.
I think for people, like Neil Gaiman or Terry Pratchett, Shadwell is something like he's like your crazy uncle or something.
Mhm.
Whereas for, like, people r minorities around Shadwell, he would be, like, horrifying, like, terrifying. The sort of person who may randomly inflict violence on you simply for existing.
Not may.
I've
He,
had
like, will.
yeah, I've had guys like Shadwell scream at me on the bus.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
I've had guys, like, stare directly into my face and tell me to go back to where I came from, and shit
yeah.
like that.
I've had
Yeah.
people like
Um,
Shadwell try and hurt me in very serious ways. He is a very scary character, and he's treated completely lovably. Um,
yeah.
even the
The other
vague
hand,
time, even the vague times where it's mentioned by one of the other characters that maybe they shouldn't like him, is pretty quickly waved away. The most notable one was Anathema being like straight up like, why do you give a shit about this dude? And it's just like, I like him.
Oh,
um
he's a really amazing man. Newt actually says it at one point. He
yeah. um it's awful, it's awful. I'm trying
Yeah.
actually right now to find the section that I'm talking about where it discusses his sins and how everybody looks over them, because it's really monstrous, y'all. It's uh I'm trying to find it because it's maybe the worst.
Um, I do wanna talk a little bit about Madame Tracy too, because in the show, Madame Tracy is a character I actually really, really like. I mean, which is in character for me. Um,
Yeah.
but um, but it was difficult to read about her in the book because they describe her as stupid, and that is unfortunate. Like, uh, just the perspective in like, you just see her in the show, and I think that her actor did a great job in the show. Um, in the book, you're reading her from a perspective that is not kind to her,
I mean,
and
actively hates her.
yeah,
Like, actively hates her. Because she is really smart in the book. But
yeah,
the descriptions
Yeah.
keep literally
That's what
saying
I kept
that
on
she's
tripping
stupid.
up because when we see the decisions she makes and what she does, she seems intelligent, but the
mhm,
book describes her as stupid, and that like tripped me up.
Yeah.
yeah,
It'll be like she's a stupid ditzy woman. And then it was like, yeah, she's performed this perfect routine that she has memorized, and she's like simultaneously while doing her job, like sorting all of their duties and taking care of the people around her. And she's like a truly
Yeah.
compassionate woman. And then it'll be
She
like,
sounds like a really intelligent, compassionate woman who like is balancing a lot of different things in her life and doing it well.
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. No, she's incredibly competent. Like, I that just frustrates me. Although, I will say that the show did a real solid move in taking out the racism from her seance. Like, like,
oh,
Yeah, I
yep.
rewatched
oh,
this show and like I gotta say, I want to congratulate Neil Gaiman on growing as a person
Yeah.
since the
because
90s.
that was rough. That was a rough scene in the book where it's like
Well, I
her.
say that to about Neil Gaiman, but let's be honest, like Terry Pratchett was almost certainly 100% responsible for that fucking spirit guide shit
I
inside
mean,
of the
again,
book.
they both were. Either one of them could have said, no, 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 no. You
Maybe
can't
don't
put
do this.
that in the fucking book. And
Yeah.
neither of them did. And neither of them did.
Yeah.
Let's be real, like this is not the first spirit fucking racist spirit guide we've seen in a Terry
No, it is
Pratchett
not.
book.
Voodoo appears again in this book. Speaking of, voodoo appears again in this book, and again as
Yeah.
like kind
Yep.
of a ridiculous religion, um,
Yeah.
in a series of insults. So like, fucking cool, buddy. I guess he
Yeah.
read like a single fucking book that mentioned voodoo and was just like, yeah, I'm gonna put this in all my stuff, huh?
Um. Oh
I'll
God.
say that I do appreciate that they do talk about voodoo specifically in the context of it being a religion in this book,
Where it was
rather
just
than
like
magic
witchcraft.
or witchcraft.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
It was worse. It had been
Yes.
worse.
Um. Oh, the one like I didn't like most of Aziraphale jumping around to people, but I did think that the American um
Evangelical shit,
television
that shit
it,
killed.
what
That was so
that was
good.
great. That was a great scene. Uh,
The subject of Sergeant Shadwell, though,
Yeah.
just to move back a little bit further, I did find a lot of his stuff funny. I did appreciate how he's depicted as being this kind of like weird gremlin who lives a disgusting life,
mhm,
is completely antisocial, and I did find that funny.
I think Shadwell, part of why he upsets me so much is what's true of so many of Terry Pratchett-esque characters, especially in these early days, where he is written in an incredibly human way. I can believe that this guy exists, which allows me to feel so much more negativity towards him than I could if
yeah,
he existed in a poor written book.
yeah,
You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. Some of Shadwell's parts are really funny. Sometimes the way that, like, especially him waking up in Madame Tracy's bedroom, and just being like, "Oh, I need to drink a can of fucking milk." Straight out, I'm going to stumble into the kitchen and desperately hunt for one. That's really funny. That's really
yeah,
fucking funny. The only real problem, and this is also true of Madame Tracy, like we were saying, is that the actual character and the way the writing describes him is different.
yeah,
They're opposed to each other, and they both
Yeah.
come from just They're extremely, extremely limited worldview.
Yeah.
They're just, you know, they're very, very, very different. Um, painfully, painfully so.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh.
Like there are some descriptions, some bits are just incredibly funny to me though. Shadwell had
Mhm.
accepted the invention of the patent cigarette lighter in the same way that conventional soldiers welcomed the repeating rifle.
Yeah.
That was so good. And then there's the description of him watching The Devil Rides Out.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
He'd seen The Devil Rides Out 15 times, 16 times if you included the time he'd been thrown out of the cinema for shouting his unflattering opinions of the amateur witchfinder Christopher Lee.
Man.
There are so many good movie references in this book.
There are. There's a lot. And I do think the basic principle of Shadwell, and I do think it's really interesting how they talk about it as a man of absolute faith, is really interesting to me. Like, it is interesting that Shadwell has a completely delusional belief that is absolutely correct.
Mhm.
Um, and powers him undyingly. I have found Shadwell's description. Um, it's rough. I'm gonna read it. Just a little paragraph here, or uh, two actually, that describe kind of his violence. Um, just really, really quick.
Mhm.
And this is
Go for
from
it.
this is about Newton Pulsiverse. Up like this starts from. Uh, but Newton found he rather liked Shadwell. People often did, much to Shadwell's annoyance. The Rajits liked him because he always eventually paid his rent and didn't cause any trouble, and was racist in such a glowering, undirected way that was quite inoffensive. It was simply that Shadwell hated everyone in the world, regardless of caste, color, or creed, and wasn't going to make any exceptions for anyone. Madame Tracy liked him. Newt had been amazed to find that the tenant of the other flat was a middle-aged, motherly soul, whose gentleman callers called as much for a cup of tea and a nice chat as for what little discipline she was still able to exact. Sometimes, when he'd nursed a half-pint of Guinness on a Saturday night, Shadwell will stand in the corridor between their rooms and shout things like, "Whore of Babylon!" But she told Newt privately that she'd always felt rather gratified that about this, even though the closest she'd been to Babylon was Tormelinos. It was like free advertising, she said. She said she didn't mind him banging on the wall and swearing during her seance afternoons either. Her knees had been giving her the jip, and she wasn't always up to operating the table rapper, she said. So a bit of muffled thumping came in useful.
Jeez.
Um,
Oh, I dislike that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it also has, you couldn't help liking Shadwell, she said. For all the good it did, though, she might as well be flicking bread pellets into a black hole. Like, he's just an evil dude. He's genuinely
Yeah.
so violent. And this isn't like Madame Tracy, where it describes him as this, and then he doesn't do those things. No, no, no.
Mhm.
He is absolutely repellent in almost anything he does the whole time. He
Yeah.
Yeah.
he is suspicious. He is like delusional. He is manipulative. He is just so gross. Um, and he is abusive to
Yeah.
almost everybody around him. It is painful.
Yeah, I'd say that the only person he isn't abusive towards is Newt.
Sort of.
Well,
He's pretty
I
rough
mean,
with
he's still
Newt.
very dismissive. He's very
He's
dismissive of
rude.
Newt.
He's rude
Yeah.
to Newt, but I wouldn't say he's abusive.
Yeah. Well, Newt's a white man, so
Yes. Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. The way he treats Newt is pretty rough. Yeah, is it directly it's not race, sexuality or gender related, but it is
It's
not
not
great.
it's not screaming, shouting, physical violence or verbal abuse.
which is what he does to the other people who
Yes.
Is
aren't
what he
white
does
men.
to everybody else.
Yes, very true, very true, very true. Um
Uh,
but he does often belittle and like low key gaslight Newt every time they're in a scene together. Um which is so fun and cool. He's a difficult character. He's a very, very difficult character.
yeah,
Um, in a very different way, and in some ways, but in the exact same way as War, and in just it just truly reveals that these men know nothing about this, what the world is like for so many people, and
yeah,
don't actually know that there's never actually been a landlord who's like so super cool with the fact that their tenant is super racist to them just because they get paid on time or paid at all.
yeah,
But
Um,
yeah,
yeah.
he's like, it's not only doesn't even pay his rent on time.
no, he doesn't. He gets it in eventually. He's actually specified later in the book to be like 4 months behind or something. Um,
Jesus.
Yeah.
he's a
Ugh.
piece of shit. And many of the comments, the Rajits come up
Or
a surprising amount. And many of his comments about them are not things that would actually be laughed off, and are actually things that would make one fear for themselves regularly.
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Um,
Um, God, what is it he says about them? He says that they do voodoo because they're brown.
yes.
Like, and then Newt is like, I don't think they're from there. I don't think. And then he's just like, yeah, no,
No,
it's
no. Keep going because he's like, Newt says, "Isn't voodoo African?" And he's like, "No, no, 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 no. They've got the secret, super evil voodoo in." And he doesn't even know where Rajit is from. I think he just says,
yeah.
I think he says Bangladesh in the end. I think they agree on,
Well,
but like he doesn't actually
he
know.
he repeats where Newt said they're from. He
Right,
didn't
Yeah.
know, and then he repeats what Newt said.
right,
Yeah,
yes. Um, which indicates that he literally just fucking hates them because they're brown. Um,
yeah,
which is somehow worse. It felt
yeah,
like they would all be bad, but it's actually worse. It's incredible. I like in terms of its absolute unawareness.
yeah,
And almost as kind of a Greek tragedy punishment, the ending of this book remains that Madame Tracy gets with Shadwell in a move that can only be described as suicidal and cruel. Um,
God, I
Madame,
hated that in the show. It is 20 times worse in the book. Like,
it is so much worse because
you know,
he has shown, at least in the show, there are like moments of kindness between them. In the book, there actually almost isn't at any point throughout the entire fucking thing. The show at least has a
she,
few warm moments. She is incredibly kind. She is a goddamn saint to this man, who she is
yeah,
basically single-handedly kept alive by making dinner for him
yeah,
through no obligation.
yeah.
Um, and providing
No,
for him.
she's an incredibly kind. Yeah, she's an incredibly kind character, and you know it. You know, who Madame Tracy should get with? It's me.
Herself.
It's me. I could do so much better.
True, true.
She
But yeah,
is
no,
your
no, you.
type. She's even got the motor scooter.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you belong with a MILF with a motor scooter and 2 helmets.
Yeah, yeah, I
I
do.
can't believe
You're
you
right.
just called her a MILF. You're ruining the classifications.
Sorry,
Is
gilf?
she a gilf?
She's childless.
Well, look,
That
see,
that
MILF
that
has
that
less
doesn't
to do with children and more
yeah,
to
it
do
just
with
has
the
to do
state of mind.
Whatever,
yeah,
lesbians.
it doesn't have
For
anything to do with
instance,
children.
you know who else has children? Daughter in Hotel Transylvania. She is not a MILF.
That's true.
Okay, I have some news for you about the internet's conception of that character.
Oh, no, she's sexy. She's not a MILF.
They
Yeah.
call her a MILF, man.
Do
Yes,
they?
and they're wrong for doing that. We need to gatekeep the category of MILF.
To not mothers. To not mothers.
Yes, MILF
What?
is a
I can't
state of
believe
mind
it.
and an
Hey,
age.
so-called
not-
feminist taking this away from mothers. I see how it is.
No, I agree with Michi on this one. Oh shoot, I agree with Chio on this one. I'll cut that.
Yeah, beep.
It,
Um,
it doesn't matter. You can call me Michi. You can call me Chio. It doesn't matter.
Neither
Okay,
are your
anyway.
legal name, so.
It's true.
legality has nothing to do with anything. Yeah. Anyways, I would beat up both these men for writing Shadwell alone.
Yeah.
It's an embarrassment. It's really, really bad. It's horrible. He could have been really good. There was a timeline in which Shadwell was an interesting character.
Yeah.
We're not in that timeline. And maybe that's why we're in a
No.
pandemic. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Um,
This was
I mean,
Shadwell's
I will
fault.
reiterate that I found a lot of his scenes very funny.
Quote me on this. The pandemic is Shadwell's fault.
Yeah, fact. There were things I found funny. There were a lot of things found funny. There's a lot of potential in this character, but anything I found funny was almost immediately undercut by his incredibly abusive behavior, and that is played off as completely harmless.
Yeah.
Constantly played off as completely harmless, when it is in fact incredibly harmful behavior.
To be honest, I would not mind his abusive behavior if it weren't for the framework that denies that it's abusive. Or
Well, that's what I'm saying. Which is played for which is treated like it's completely harmless.
Yeah. I mean, if that stuff was taken seriously as harmful behavior, that would be a completely different narrative. Like,
if the other characters didn't like him, because there are a lot of characters in Terry Pratchett's works that are like abusive shitbags, played for laughs. But it's not like the other characters are like, oh, please, take my life, take my money, please, sir. Right? Like, that doesn't happen. Those two things don't exist at the same time. Because in his other stories, Terry Pratchett is only writing about British people. He's only writing about British people. So it's always British people being abusive to other British people. And it works because he understands why that's bad. And he's writing types of abuse that he understands as bad. Not true in this. We've been doing this for a long time. Let's just rapid shot, like name quick every racist part of this book that we haven't already mentioned.
I lost count, honestly.
There's an
Gonna be real.
insane amount. There's an insane amount. Aziraphale, we didn't mention that Aziraphale hops into an African man practicing religion.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Was
not a
that
great
the
scene.
the ancestor scene?
That was the ancestor scene. Yes.
Yeah.
Not the spirit guy scene.
Basically, the majority of the scenes where Aziraphale is hopping around after accidentally stepping into the portal, trying to find a receptive body,
Which is not in the show, by the way.
He wants to go. Yeah. Most of those scenes are racist.
Except for the evangelicals. Okay, so I forgot to mention this. He lambasts the Hour of Power, which is a hell of a move because that is a real show. that's really on the air,
Oh,
and is really
did
like
not
that.
know that.
No, no, no.
That
It sounds like he
bangs.
made it up for a joke. It is extremely real. It is the most popular televangelist show ever, um, and has been for our entire lifetimes. Um, uh, it's fucking really funny. But it's also crazy. It's like watching
Yeah.
this dude hit a fucking hornet's nest. I like cannot believe he actually by name is like, yo, fuck
Oh.
the hour of power. These pieces of shits are greedy. They're just fucking idiots. Like, whoa, go off, dude. Hell yeah.
Very angry, and it's very well directed
It
anger.
is.
Yeah.
It is. It is. It's
Yeah.
really, really interesting. Um, it's totally a response. You know, Neil Gaiman at that point, I think had just moved to or recently moved to America. Um, and he would go back and forth his entire life. Like, um, and you know, he clashes with American culture and ideals a lot.
Mhm.
And I can absolutely see these two men. I can see Neil Gaiman introducing the Hour of Power to Terry Pratchett, and I can see these
Yeah.
two men having a hell of a conversation about it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so funny, so
Yeah.
so funny.
Yeah.
Um,
Um.
there, yeah. We mentioned briefly. Japanese people get mentioned a lot. For a
Oh boy, did
400
they
page book.
do.
Uh,
The fucking wasabi, the car.
Yeah.
there's a lot of levels. It actually comes up a shocking amount. It's
Yeah. And then
Oh,
there's
the
the end, uh, around the conclusion where Aziraphale fixes, the car, and it's almost a good joke, except it's spoiled by being racist at the very end, where
yeah.
it's like he's describing how the car suddenly now functions well, and then he gets to the voice, command thing,
yeah, yeah. The
then
haiku.
spoils it by making it speak in haikus. I was like, "I."
Yeah,
Oh, there's the Tibetans that dig tunnels to spy on people.
yeah.
Um.
That one was, I will say, actually a lot less racist than every other minority.
Mhm.
I thought
Yeah.
it
Oh,
was
yeah.
I thought it was interesting because they were more conscious that there is a idea in our head about what a Tibetan is, and then there are actual people, and that's what the
Yeah.
joke is about. It was still
Yeah. And
mildly racist, but
Yeah, but to be
certainly
honest,
um.
not
it
as much
didn't
as I
bug me.
expected.
It
No,
didn't it didn't really bug
Yeah.
me when I was reading it.
Because they're just normal people who were like pulled here by Adam's superpowers. Uh. And they're like, what the fuck is going on?
though I will say, and this is super specific, but one of the Tibetans mentioned is a bicycle repairman who does not have the name Lobsang, but it is
Uh huh.
the first time a Tibetan bicycle repairman would appear in a Terry Pratchett uh, novel, but not the last time,
Uh huh.
which
Oh.
is a
Uh.
weirdly specific thing.
Um. One line, this isn't related to that, but one line I loved was Aziraphale. I mean, Anathema referring to Aziraphale and Crowley as consenting bicycle repairmen.
Oh yes, yes, that's true too. I forgot
Yeah.
about that.
She,
Such a
when
good
she's
line.
like, like I, which kind of is a follow up to like, um, she was safe the whole time because she realizes they're a gay couple. Um, she's like, oh yeah, that's why they felt odd, but she was perfectly safe the whole time. Uh, which was
Okay,
very funny to me.
I did want to briefly mention my copy of Good Omens has two short pieces in here. One is Terry Pratchett on Neil Gaiman, and one of them is Neil Gaiman on Terry Pratchett. Um,
Mhm.
These were both written later. It doesn't specify exactly when, but I think that these are probably 2006 editions, which is when the forward is from as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I mean, these two men clearly have so much respect for each other, and how could they not? This book was written right at the start of both of their true careers, and they would both
Mhm.
become absolute legends within the literature industry. Good Omens itself would have a major impact on both their lives as they would tour this book together many, many, many times.
Mhm.
And they have a great fondness for each other. This book
Yeah.
was absolutely the start of a lifelong friendship, which they both highly valued. And you can see that reflected here. Some of the criticism they have for each other is not criticism, but comments echo what we're talking about, which is like Terry Pratchett says Neil Gaiman belongs in script writing, for
Yeah.
instance, and he talks about him getting out of comic books, and they talk about one of them being kind of a grumpy old man, and
Mhm.
the other one being like a up and coming youngin, that's really sweet. They also both make
What are you
fun of.
guys talking about?
I'm talking about the little Terry Pratchett on Neil Gaiman and Neil Gaiman on Terry Pratchett sections. Just really quick while
Of
you were doing
what?
this. The back of my book has two sections called Terry Pratchett on Neil Gaiman and Neil Gaiman on Terry Pratchett. And because I
Oh,
was the only one that read them, I was just going to talk about it while you were out doing dishes. Um,
okay.
they both make fun of Neil Gaiman's hat because he was a much younger man. He did not have a very good style,
Mhm.
which I think is so very, very funny.
Yeah.
Um, and they just talk about him making that transition from journalism into books. Also, I say he was
Yeah.
much younger. To his credit, he was probably 27. He's older than I am, but I'm still going to look
Yeah.
stupid when I'm 27.
Yeah.
Um, I have absolute faith. Anyways, that was my little piece. I just wanted to mention it. I think they're really charming pieces. If you can get a copy of the book that has it, I highly recommend you do. They're
Might
not,
be able to
Mhm.
find it online.
yeah, absolutely. They're not super impactful. I think it's just sweet to see how these two men truly loved each other and truly impacted each other's lives.
Yeah.
They talk
And
about.
decided to never collaborate on a novel again.
Nope, that was the right choice. I can't imagine collaborating on a novel. It seems impossible. It does
Yeah.
Yeah.
mention specifically Terry Pratchett was talking to Neil Gaiman. They were talking to each other because Neil Gaiman was working on American Gods at the same time Terry Pratchett was working on The Amazing Maurice.
Mhm.
Both incredible
Oh,
hits
wow.
in their library. And both of them thought,
Amazing
God,
Race is my favorite novel.
yeah, both of them thought, oh my God, I wish I could write that novel.
Yeah.
Which I love. And I love to imagine a Terry Pratchett American Gods. Because
Yeah.
holy shit, that would be incredible. Um,
Mhm.
Yeah.
because Terry Pratchett really doesn't like American too. Like, yeah, like holy shit.
Correctly. Correctly.
Yeah.
Um.
I mean, I live here. I'm not gonna fault him.
I mean, to be honest, I don't think very highly of the British, so
Well,
No,
yeah. Both
no.
shit places.
Shit places. Better than a lot of places, but shit places.
Yeah.
I'd rather be American than British. That's for fucking sure. But
Yeah.
oh
that's
yeah,
just
I would absolutely rather live here.
that's just because I can't imagine having a lord. Can you imagine? Senator is bad enough, but a
Yeah.
lord. If I actually had to call that dude a fucking lord, I would. I mean, even now, my American blood, it's roiling. um.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. Is there any final comments? Is there anything that we'd like to say before we go?
Yeah,
Um.
one thing was that I mentioned in the chat that I preferred the book Good Omens to the TV show Good Omens, and I suppose I should clarify on that a little bit, which is my biggest problem with the show, the fucking pacing. Like, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't feel like it needs to be there and like it's just kind of slowing things down. Like in episode 3, there's the subplot with Crowley getting the holy water. Very unnecessary, and it felt weird watching it.
Wow,
Oh,
that is
well,
a bad
I'm about
take.
to fight you.
Yeah,
I am
that's a
about
bad
Oh,
to
take. I'm
fight
really?
so
you.
sorry. Yeah,
Yeah,
what
no,
the
that
hell?
is
No,
a
I'm
Of
sorry.
terrible.
all the
I stand by that. I fucking hated those scenes watching it. Like,
I
of
l
all the
I
scenes to pick out, that one is really interesting to me because
yeah,
Crowley, you
because
move
there's
too fast for me. Um,
really.
is maybe one of the
is the
best
most
lines in the whole
Oh, no,
series.
no, like it is, like oh, I disagree so hard. Like,
Yeah, and the idea that like
Specifically, I remember
Aziraphale is
that
thinking that
scene.
he's going to kill himself and he's arming himself for war, like setting up the moral center of both these. Yeah,
Yeah, but I specifically remember watching that scene and the watching the argument in front of the duck pond and having it like feel just slightly off or slightly weird. Like I constantly remember that scene where Crowley is planning the heist. I remember that scene. I always forget why it's there, and I'm like, that's so weird and confusing. Why is that there? And then it was
God, that
like
scene is so funny.
weirdly gratifying reading the book and going, "Oh, the reason why that conflict felt forced is because it wasn't fucking in here. It was literally inserted into the show."
oh, I loved that. I loved all their backstory stuff,
Yeah, I'm
but I
beginning to see
really
that apparently that this is a hot take.
I
yeah,
mean,
Yeah,
it just goes to what the real difference is between the book and the show.
yeah,
The show is very clearly much more headed by Neil Gaiman.
mhm,
He was the one who, from the very beginning, really pushed the idea that they would have a movie or a TV show, and
mhm,
he has worked in that space his entire life. Yes, there was work done together by both of them on what the script would look like, but absolutely, this is much more Neil Gaiman's story, and it is a fundamentally different story because of it. It
mhm,
is a romance, and
yeah,
episode
yeah.
3 and all of that pacing is so different because it is not about Adam and the them. It is about Aziraphale and Crowley, which is
yeah,
fundamentally different from the book.
Here's the
and
thing about Good Omens being a romance. Like, it's not the TV show is like okay, I hate to say this, but it is like queer bait, right? Like
No, no, we can't
is
get into
not
this argument.
it is not canonically a romantic relationship. So it's
Yes,
like a
well,
romance without a real romance.
no, they are.
but it doesn't yeah, and it doesn't matter. What
They're in love. They're
It matters to
clearly
me.
no, they're
like,
clearly in love, and like the
like,
whole show is
Yeah,
about
they
their
clearly
relationship.
are.
they show in every it doesn't
It's
matter
not
if it's a
text.
romance because
It
'kay, no,
matters
no,
to me.
yeah,
I mean, it
I
is in
understand that.
text though.
To to
No,
me,
no, it really isn't.
they show and especially in those scenes you're talking about, and throughout the whole thing, and the reason why I love reading about them so much, especially in fan fiction and stuff, is because in the show, throughout the whole show, it is it is presented as a romance, but it's the most important parts of a romance, which is how much these characters care about each other. Like the holy water scene, the you move too fast for me, that is an incredibly romantic line. And it doesn't it
It is romantic, but it's not
it's
real. It's not
I mean,
but
I think you're
in
absolutely
every
right.
way
I
they
think they
show
are,
that they care about each other.
yeah, very texturally in love, and um, like wholeheartedly. Like I don't think it's queer bait at all. I think it shows a
holy
different.
shit. You know,
I think it
if I
shows a
realized
different
this
form of
was
relationship, but I
if I realized this was going to be an actual I had no idea that the fact that True Good Omens is not actually a romance textually was going to be controversial. I would have like prepared for it and put together an actual argument. As it is, I've only
So
rewatched like 3 episodes, so I can't like argue it, but I also think that you are incorrect there.
I
I
mean,
think it is just factually not a
we
textually a
have a whole
romance.
like building their romance episode. We have like a breakup scene, a get back together scene.
I think it is
We have their
queer
first
bait in the
meeting.
same sense that Yuri on Ice is queer bait.
I don't know anything about Yuri on Ice, and I don't really want to.
Oh, well,
Um,
it's a weird thing to say because Yuri on Ice is good, but
it's really not my
is
kind of thing.
also one of those things that
Don't they
runs
don't
very,
they
very
kiss
close.
in Yuri on Ice? Like
They
I thought they
do,
like
but then
were
but it is
together.
specifically an accident.
Oh my god.
They do kiss, but it is an accident. He slips on the ice and their lips meet.
Oh, yes. I
And
mean
then
that's
they
stupid.
exchange rings, but they also do a specific like explanation for why what they're doing is not like it's not like an engagement ring.
Like,
It's one
the
of those
thing
things that runs up very close to being canonically queer, but it isn't.
Yeah, I think Good Omen for me. Good Omens is very clearly a depiction of two uh, angel demons in love, and
yeah.
a
I mean,
lot of the story is dedicated to investigating and falling in love with their love.
Okay,
It
so
is a central thrust of their story.
are you arguing that Good Omens is about textually about romantic love?
Good Omens, the show.
Yes. Are you saying that this is textually about romantic love?
I wouldn't even say that it matters, like,
I think they are.
necessarily if
Yeah.
it's romantic love, because they're shown to care about each other so much that it doesn't, like, they clearly have a relationship that closely mirrors a romantic relationship, but it doesn't need to be an explicitly romantic relationship to be incredibly endearing and compelling, um, just
See, you
because
say
of the
that,
way.
and if this weren't for the fact that there's like a long history behind like queer erasure about the taboo surrounding queer love,
Whoa.
and
Oh, okay.
romantic love
Hold
in
on. Hold on.
televisions and movies, I would agree with you. But in this particular instance, because of that history and that context, just
I think it's also relevant that both of these characters are non-binary, fully
Mhm.
factually cannot like they say it, and I think that's
yeah.
really important to mention as well.
Yeah.
Um, and yes, I do really think that a grand majority of the show is taken up by a plot about their romance.
Yeah.
You think again, I keep on coming back this. Do you think this is textually canonically queer romantic relationship?
I think these two like are in a like yes, I
Okay,
do.
no, I don't agree.
Like to the extent that they are playing a love song as the ending scene over their dinner together and explicitly mention it and draw attention to it. Um, like one of the most famous love songs ever.
Yeah, I
Um,
grew up watching Sherlock.
Like,
um,
I would say I I understand where you're coming from, and especially where you're coming from in relation to the queer baiting in Sherlock and, like, how that comes across and how and the similarities that you could pull from these 2. It feels completely different to me, um, and
I mean,
that's
I would
just.
say it is a much better show in the sense that they never explicitly say that the characters are not queer and that they are not in a romantic relationship.
Mhm,
I also think at no point do they actually like make it unambiguously clear that this is a romantic relationship.
mhm.
Like, sorry, that wasn't even the point I was making. I began making. I just didn't realize that that was going to be a hot or controversial take.
yeah, I
If I
don't think,
realized I was going to have to be making this argument, I would have put some preparation
and
into it.
at
But
the and I don't think it's like I don't know. To me, it doesn't read as queer bait because I don't think that these people are intentionally not saying or not completing an arc, but pointing to it over and over and over again as a means to draw in a queer audience. I think that repeatedly and consistently they have been in support of queer behavior. These characters are queer, factually and canonically, and they aren't afraid of that. And certainly didn't just use it as a marketing tactic.
Mhm.
And I think there's also not like as passionately like I'm not as strongly convinced of this particular argument, but I also think it's worth noting that having non-human characters be non-binary is different than having human characters be non-binary.
But
Mhm.
But I
having
think that's a
characters,
different argument.
yeah, and like for me, having characters who are explicitly like infected by humanity and have become human over their 6,000 years of staying here, still be non-binary matters.
Okay.
As a person who's always like themselves felt non-binary and pushed into a world of binaries and in many ways infected by it, right? Like I am a person who is autistic and non-binary and masks incredibly well
Mhm.
in many situations in my life. Like I have become these things because I am forced to, um, and yet I am still this thing. I am still devoid of gender, like these
Mhm.
characters very much are. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
Again,
that is
that's
really
like
important to me interacting. I understand this is not an opinion or making more intensely. Like this is just a thing you're
yeah.
talking about. And you're right.
To
It is
me, like
absolutely a trope that like monsters get to be non-binary, or God gets to be non-binary, but nobody else,
Yeah.
and not people for sure.
yeah.
And I totally get that point. That is way more
Again,
valid.
like
But I think how they
other thing
presented it in
simple
the
thing
story
is like
mattered to
I
me.
can observe the fact that non-binary people as a whole seem to love Good Omens and relate to it strongly.
Yeah.
So like that
I'm
is like
Yeah. It is the
um
only depiction of a masculine non-binary character I can think of.
Mhm.
And like, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe they could have done more. But you know,
it,
it's the
I
I'm so
simply
glad
like
for what I have kind of thing, right? Like it's like, yeah,
yeah.
I wish there was a character exactly like me on TV, and God, I hope we get there one day. Right now,
Yeah.
I am so glad that these people are on TV.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess like again, for that if it weren't for the fact that I know for a fact that queer canonical queer romantic relationships are so incredibly taboo, maybe I would have an easier time accepting the fact or accepting the idea that maybe Good Omens isn't queer bait and it is a canonical depiction of a queer romantic relationship. But, like, I just don't buy it.
I
Me, the fact that it's like me, it is never made explicit.
For me, something
There's
that
always an element of plausible deniability to it.
and yeah, I don't see that at all. Like I think if you played this in front of 90% of Americans, um, it wouldn't read like that. Like I think that's the other important thing to remember is that we are in a bubble and we interact only with queer people. And there I don't think that there is a plausible deniability to this. I think if you showed this to most of America, they would look at that and be like, those are queer people. Um,
Mhm.
Yeah, but again, I think the Yuri on Ice comparison
and
is worth
um,
coming into here because the overwhelming majority people watching uh Yuri on Ice would also be like, "Oh, yeah, this is a queer relationship," except for the fact that there are all these points in Yuri on Ice where they like make sure that there is textual room for deniability.
which I don't feel that they do in Good Omens. And what I would also like to say is that I like that their relationship is queer. I like that their relationship is queer more than just their personal identities. They are doing it differently because their love needs to be different because of who they are. And their
Yeah.
romance is very much depicted within those terms. I love that their relationship is not traditional. I like it more for that reason. Um,
It yeah, and I
it
know a lot
touches
of
on such
people.
a level that I like can't fully describe because I have had so many relationships that are outside of the norm, that are themselves
Yeah.
queer in their own ways, that other people don't see as um like real relationships. And then I get to non-binary people like me on TV having that sort of relationship with an incredible level of love and respect given to it by the text and by the actors and by the writers and characters and everything within it. It is not just played for laughs, which is something I've
Yeah, and
never
that's
gotten to see
that's
before.
the thing that's the thing about the Good Omens is that, you know, and what really draws me to it is that so much of it is about their relationship and their love for each other, and it's not played for laughs. It's not, "Oh, look at these, like, queer people," it's or like it's the joke isn't that they're gay. It doesn't even bring up that they are gay or that they're this is it's funny that they come across as a gay couple. Like it's taken their relationship is taken very seriously and their care for each other is taken very seriously. Um and I do really appreciate that. And I and it's the same, like, it's not a joke that Crowley, is Nanny Astaroth, it's not a joke that, Crowley presents as a woman there and in some of the flashback in at least one of the flashbacks,
I mean, it
it's
is
not a
kind of
joke.
played for a joke that he's Nanny
It
Astaroth.
it's played as a joke, but the joke is that like Nanny
The
Astaroth is
joke,
like Mary Poppins, not
yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, it's not haha, uh, mask pre- usually mask presenting person inside of a dress.
yes.
Isn't the
And
joke, but it is like quite literally a
it
joke.
is a joke, but the joke is not him. And
Yeah,
that's huge. And to their credit, that is also true in the book, which I forgot to
yeah,
mention earlier, but I was really, really happy to see.
yeah, yeah, and it's like yeah, it's that part's not a joke in the book. Like Crowley saying like nice dress to Aziraphale, like it suits you. Like that's not played as a joke. It's just there. And like
yeah. Um. Anyway, it's clear that the three of us are just going to have to disagree on this.
mhm,
I'll go back at some point, rewatch the show. But in my opinion, you simply let 50 years of television and the last 50 years of filmmaking, and you simply cannot divorce it from those contexts.
And I'm not
Um,
trying to. I think because of those contexts, it is more valuable.
yeah, I mean, simply, I just don't, I do not believe that it is explicitly canonically a romantic relationship. Um, Anyway, I was going to say I prefer the book because I think the book has much better pacing.
yeah. Um
Yeah,
I
which I don't agree with. I really didn't
I
like the
I
pacing in the book. Um,
I actually don't agree with it either. I think the show's pacing is much better, especially when it comes to the climax. Like I think that was just so much better put together.
um,
Um
I did
I
like the climax better in the show, but like
I will say
there's
I
a lot
do
of
think the show has pacing
stuff
problems. Like I do think it has
yeah.
moments that totally lull and aren't great. Like I don't think the pacing
really
in
drag.
either. Yeah, I don't think the pacing in either the book or the show is very good. Um,
Mhm.
Yeah,
for me, because
I
again,
mean,
I just don't like Neil Gaiman's style. And again,
And the big
this
thing
is
is I liked the hospital nunnery stuff inside of the book. I thought it was funny and memorable. Um,
yeah, I literally fell asleep during it. Um,
God.
which is
Uh,
notable because I only listened to this book outside in what is now currently winter in Seattle. It is
holy
fucking
shit.
cold, and I actually fell asleep. It is so boring, to me.
Mhm.
Um,
Um, yeah, I thought
Yeah.
it went I did think it went a little long, but I did also really enjoy the, baby swap scene. Um,
yeah,
I actually
Thought the pace in the book was like a lot breezier, had a lot more of clip. I did think it had some problems, like specifically the Four Horsemen stuff. Even the good bits, there were too much of it. There was just too much of it.
yeah.
yeah.
It was repetitive and went on a long time.
The book definitely benefits from what is always true of books, and they're, I think, one of the greatest strengths in that you can switch scenes instantly and then pop back into the scene you were originally in. Something
Yeah.
Mhm.
that's used incredibly well in the baby swap scene. Um,
Also, I thought that a lot of the dialogue flowed more naturally. Um, I thought I also just really loved all of I think inside of a book you can cram a lot more jokes in,
yeah,
at
absolutely.
least with Terry Pratchett style, than you can do in the show. So the book is a lot funnier, and I thought it had like a lot more of an edge.
Yes, I would
Mhm.
agree with this. The show relies a lot on just a general absurdist vibe to give it a lot of its humor, um,
Mhm.
which is limited, right? And is not a laugh out loud kind of joke. It's just like kind of a thing that allows you to be a little more wild than you would in a lot of other television shows. And
Yeah.
it's something I'm very familiar with because this kind of thing is like what makes most of my favorite TV shows. You know, your Pushing Daisies. I'm trying to think of one that's not by the Pushing Daisies guy. Your Red Dwarfs
Oh,
rely on
yeah, I
this
love
to
Red
some
Dwarf.
extent. Just like
You
putting,
really like Brian Fuller.
I fucking love that man. I wish I didn't sometimes, but I love him a lot. He makes stuff for me. I forgot that he did American Gods too. I nearly said Wonderfalls was with the other show. I was gonna say Pushing Daisies and Wonderfalls, and then I remembered it was also a Brian Fuller joint.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What do you think of Hannibal?
I can't watch Hannibal. Can't watch Hannibal. Can't watch Hannibal. Can't watch Hannibal. It makes me feel emotions that are illegal. Illegal.
Wow,
Think if I
really?
got really into Hannibal, it would get weird. It would get weird. Uh,
I watched a few episodes of Hannibal and fucking hated it.
the level of attraction I have for men is unbearable. And uh, I can't
I
watch.
am
I
thinking of
can't.
going back to Hannibal though and double checking.
I literally just, I
Um,
think I can't watch Hannibal. The level of attraction I
yeah.
have for men is really, really, I really, really love men.
I
And
think part of it might have been just that I hate the trajectory that the Silence of the Lambs Red Dragon franchise has gone in over the years, where it seems to have like so fully into sort of I guess like serial killer worship.
yeah, absolutely,
Like it's
absolutely.
sort of like it's completely abandoned any semblance of empathy and humanity for the victims of killers. Is
Yeah,
one of the things I thought that the books got really well.
absolutely. And we've talked at
The
length
idea
about
of like
this.
lives railed and snuffed out, whereas in Hannibal, like corpses are literally just decoration.
Literally
Um,
decoration. Have you considered though
yeah.
that I want to twist up Hugh Dancy's little body like a flex, like stretcho? Have you
Ugh,
considered that?
ugh.
Um, because that's really why the show exists, right? Like
You
it's just see
You're
beautiful
so
men
gay.
covered in blood.
God,
Like
you
I
are
just
you are you are
disgustingly queer.
You are asking this. You are asking a lesbian this. I want to remind
I
you.
am acutely aware, but I'm saying like that's why you don't enjoy Hannibal. You don't enjoy Hannibal for two reasons.
Odd.
You don't want it. You don't want to twist Hugh Dancy's body around like a little flex stretcho, and because you actually like the books, and I think you'd enjoy Hannibal a lot more if you knew nothing about the books. Um,
Yes. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
like I think
probably
they're
if
just
I were
better.
like,
If you didn't know anything about Thomas Harris and you watched this as a standalone show, I think you'd like it a lot better.
yeah, probably,
Because
probably just like caring way too much about the books and also like
I mean, you really love the
being
books.
completely unattracted to men.
Yeah, it's a rookie mistake. Yeah, this is not a show for people who aren't attracted to men. Um, but Brian Fuller did this one for the gays. Um, and I would kiss.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I can't get into this show. I'd get weird about it. I can't. I know my limits. Um,
Gosh.
I can't even look at a picture of Hugh Dancy without saying something like, "You don't want to stretch Hugh Dancy's body around like a little flex stretch." Oh.
Be honest, I'm now think it would be very entertaining if you got really into Hannibal.
No, it would be awful. I'd have 250 fucking fanfics open. The fanfic for Hannibals are insane, dude. They
Oh
are.
yeah, I am actually considering watching Hannibal just to go read the fan fiction.
They are a lot. I occasionally dip my toe into a little fanfic action for completely safe for work reasons. And
Uh-huh.
yeah, they're a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like watching people be horny, so I think it would be really funny if you got super into Hannibal.
Yeah. But I won't. Ever. Um
You
it's a
sound like you sound like an addict trying to avoid the substance.
I
Yeah, and
essentially am. Men
and
covered
that
in blood,
substance is
that's
men.
mine. Men covered in blood, I can't. I can't touch it. It's too dangerous. I get too wild. I like yeah. I know you guys have never like I guess Mulch did, but other than that, never really watched me in a relationship with a man, but it gets a lot, y'all. I really like men.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um
Uh,
Look at the men like her.
I love men so much.
it is a little bit bizarre, but
I think I
we
might go
we love you
outside and
anyway.
think about men. Um yeah. Yeah, yeah. Oh God.
Okay. Um, any final thoughts about
Do you th-
this book?
do you think Brian Fuller's like vision of masculinity is unique? I just think about him and think about all the men in his show. Like it's so crazy, and I just like
I've got to be totally real. I simply haven't watched enough Brian Fuller to know. I mean, I think I saw some about what's that show about the Grim Reapers?
dead like me, dead like me.
Yeah, Dead
Oh my
Like
God,
Me. I
yes,
watched
love
some of
that
Dead
show.
Like Me and a little bit of Hannibal, and that's my entire experience.
Oh, that's the Dead Like Me guy? I love Dead Like Me.
I
Oh, yeah.
love dead like me. George was made for the lesbians, but Rube was made for the gays. Holy shit. Um, George is great though, and I do love her. She's a really funny character. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. So Brian Fuller did Dead Like Me, Wonder Falls, Heroes, Pushing Daisies, Hannibal, American Gods. Um, and I think about him a lot
Yeah.
because he
Yeah.
makes TV for me
Yeah.
and nobody else.
Yeah.
It
It's all
does
yours.
seem to like be very tapped into the things that you like.
It's actually opposite. Like to my credit, it's actually opposite. My mom really liked Brian Fuller, and so I watched
Oh no.
all of these shows growing up, like as they released. So Pushing
He
Daisies came out.
warped your brain at a young
Yeah,
age.
so Pushing Daisies came out 2007 to 2009, and basically created my vision of an ideal man. Um, and I watched Heroes once it finished, and I love men. Um,
He
And
turned you into the filthy queer that you are.
then yeah, Dead Like Me and Wonder Falls. I watched as a
Mhm.
kid with my mom. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
just wow.
It's like,
God, Pushing Daisies is so good. I could do an entire fucking 3 hour podcast on the cinematography in Pushing Daisies rather than whatever book we just talked about.
Yeah. Man.
Because it is
Uh,
so good. The fucking visual design in Pushing Daisies, like, it's incredible. It's incredible to me that it never got more attention than it did, which is, it did get a lot of attention,
I mean,
but it could have
it
had
was always
more.
a cult hit,
It,
I
it,
think.
it was, but God, it's so perfect. The visuals, like, God. Um, all right, before this becomes a Brian Fuller fan podcast, let's go. I'm done.
Yeah,
okay.
my ears are starting to hurt from the headphones.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this
Um,
cannot become a Brian Fuller fan podcast.
yeah.
I
Um,
think I
I
think it
think,
would get a little out of hand just from like you,
Just for me. It's
your
just for me.
passion.
I feel yeah. Oh, just for me. Um
uh, I do want to say a last note is just to sum up, like, why I am so into this show and, like, why I devote so much of my time to both, like, reading and writing Good Omens fanfic is just the pure fact that there are so few stories that show two people caring about each other an incredible amount. And, like, the few places I found that, I always get really into it. And I've done that. I like this is queer, which makes it 10 times better for me, but I've also done that when I found it in scraps with straight relationships. Like, the fact, like, just showing people caring about each other to such an incredible degree is so compelling to me. Um, and that is the heart of why I love um this, along with everything else with it, like
yeah,
the
also
themes
these
about
ones
being
can't
human.
die.
Yeah, yeah. And and just incredibly human themes that this piece of media combines with that. Like, that's why I'm so into it. Um yeah.
Be
I mean,
honest, like characters caring deeply about each other and loving each other intensely is why I watch shonen anime.
mhm.
That's fair.
Read
Actually,
shonen manga.
I'll give that one to shonen anime. I will. That is a very real and very appealing part.
Yeah.
Um Especially the like hero pushing through moment stuff. Very good.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Very, very, very good.
Yeah.
Heartwarming and touching, and I'm not a huge anime person. I do love that and do very much respect that.
Yes. I just want to see friends who will die for each other.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
We just ticked over 3 hours. I have to pee more than any human being has ever been. Um.
uh,
And I don't think I can pick up my medicine anymore. Uh.
Oh no,
okay.
sorry.
Good night,
Anyway, next
listeners.
episode. Yeah.
We'll listen to.
Good night.
We'll be talking about lords and ladies next.
Yeah.
Which will
Which
be
will
very exciting.
definitely not be a 3 hour episode. Uh,
Yeah,
Most
I think
certainly not.
this
because
is our first 3-hour episode.
To be fair, a lot of that was like technical issues.
yes,
I
absolutely,
think.
absolutely. I knew this was going to be a long episode though, because just to by themselves, Mulch could go for 3 hours on this show.
Yes,
Uh,
it's true.
Which could go their entire life about this show. Let's be real.
I
uh,
have been since 2019.
we love autism in this house, and autism fuels us. And it could be worse. You could have a Bible special interest. Just think
Uh,
what that would
just
make you.
just like you.
I know somebody mentioned
Uh,
C.S. Lewis the other day, and I
I
became
think
a monster.
I think we'd actually become the same person if I got a Bible section. Admittedly, I did read Genesis to write Good Omens fanfic, which is getting close. Like, it's a tangential interest. because of my Good Omens interest.
If you get converted to Christianity because of your Good Omens special interest, that'll be the funniest fucking thing to ever happen to anybody.
It's 100% not gonna happen.
It's not, but it would
Like,
be
Mulch has become less
very
Christian. Like, Mulch started Good Omens an atheist and somehow became less Christian,
It's
getting
true.
into the Good Omens fandom.
Well, we'll
That
see.
would be very funny, though.
We'll see. We'll see. We'll see.
I am planning to read the whole Bible just for fan fiction opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to do a little Bible study action with you. I really
Yeah.
would.
Yeah.
Actually, wouldn't mind joining in. I have this lecture course on the Old Testament
Mm.
I could go back to.
Is it Christian or Jewish?
Uh,
I guess you called it the Old Testament, so it's Christian.
Technically, it's like I would say it was technically irreligious. Is
Mm.
it is more of a
So Christian.
historical. It is a sort of historical and literary study of the Old Testament.
Oh. Yeah.
Oh, that's not the sort of thing you like?
No, it's not my whole jam. Bible historians are like a whole subset of people who are like pretty uninteresting to me and also like very closely linked to pretty wild ideas that have had very painful real world effects.
I feel like you are misunderstanding what the course is.
I mean, it's a historical look at the events in the
Oh,
Old Testament.
no.
No, okay.
No, because it's like about the historical context in which the Old Testament was created.
Oh, okay. That is a lot more interesting.
Yeah, I was really confused.
It's not. It's
And
not
it's
my.
also sort of a study of the Old Testament as a piece of literature.
Yeah, it's not my personal special interest as what I like is theology, but I do see the appeal very, very much.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm leaving now. Lords and
Okay.
ladies, next week.
Yep. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.